Hey guys, make sure you stick around after the Superman Origin Talk for a special mailbag segment celebrating our 250th episode. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the milestone 250th episode of Digging for Kryptonite. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to build the perfect Superman origin is the host of Always Hold On to Smallville, returning guest, Zach Moore. Welcome back.
Hey, Anthony. Honored to be here on the 250th episode. I can't believe it. That's more episodes than Smallville has, Anthony. You had now a longer-running podcast than Smallville was a TV show. Can you believe it?
Amazing. Well, I'm honored to have you here. While you don't bear the mantle of most frequent Digging for Kryptonite guest, you are up there. You have been on a bunch, and you've so graciously had me on your show many times. I know we've picked up a bunch of audience members along the way as a result of my being on your show, so I appreciate that. We've podcasted together a bunch over the years. We have offline conversations all the time, and yeah, I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoy being a part of the Digging for Kryptonite family here.
Right on. So this is an episode I've wanted to do for a while. Back in 2023, I wrote an article for 13th Dimension run by past guest Dan Greenfield, and it was 13 questions to build the perfect Superman origin. Now for this episode, we've expanded it to 20, and then we have even a few more questions suggested by audience members that we'll sprinkle in. But since I did that article, I thought, man, this would be a fun episode to do at some point. And episode 250 felt like a great opportunity for it. The other reason we're doing it now is that just a couple months after people hear this episode, it will be the 40-year anniversary of John Byrne's Man of Steel. Now, there's a part of me that's like, man, 40 years, what a long time. But then I say to myself, you and I are both going to be 40 next year. And I say to myself, you know what, 40, not that old, not that long ago.
No, we're not over the hill yet. There's got some years in us yet. But yeah, it's funny how that works when something seems so ancient and then you realize 1986, I was born in 1987.
Yeah, it's amazing. So obviously we did our dedicated Byrne era coverage late last year, so we didn't need to necessarily revisit that reboot specifically, but certainly it will be baked into the conversation that we have here. I guess I only really have one disclaimer, which is not to speak for you, but I like to think that for us Superman fans, we recognize that there are different ways to spin the Superman origin, and certain choices will be right depending on which kind of story you're telling. If you're Zack Snyder and you're doing Man of Steel and Superman's reveal to the world is going to be this paradigm shifting world event, well, in an instance like that, you're probably not going to have him flying around as Superboy. Yet if you're Mark Waid in the pages of Action Comics currently, fantastic. Perfect opportunity to show Clark as Superboy. So our purpose here is to build our quote unquote perfect Superman origin. But at the same time, we're not here saying this is the only way that you can tell a Superman origin story, or that this is the only way it can be told anytime you do it, right?
I totally agree. I think, look, we all have our preferences as fans, all right? But that's the beauty of these characters. You can tell the same stories again and again and again in new ways and new combinations, and that keeps it fresh. Like, if it was the same thing over and over, I mean, what are we doing? Like, these characters would not have the longevity they had if you said, well, I mean, we told his origin in Action Comics #1. We there's nothing else to say. We have to stick to that for 85 years. It wouldn't make any sense. And same with the movies. I love Superman the movie. Do I want them to remake that beat for beat when they make new Superman movies? Of course not, right? So it's the variety is the spice of life, as they say, and we're going to go through all that variety here.
You mentioned Action Comics #1. This is not one of our questions because it's so well settled at this point, but it delights me to no end to think about the fact that in Action 1, we have the baby Kal-El found by a passing motorist and brought to an orphanage. And that's really all we're told. It seems that the baby grows to adulthood at the orphanage. And it's not until Superman #1 in 1939, a year later, where we now have the insertion of the Kents raising him. I just love the notion. There must have been at least someone back in the day, some kid hanging out at the newsstand in 1939 reading Superman #1 being like, this is hogwash. Everyone knows Superman grew up at the orphanage. What is this? Right? You know, there had to have been at least someone pissed off at arguably Superman's first retcon.
Yeah. I don't know when the term retconning came into existence. Probably not in 1939, but that would apply. Right? I mean, the more you add on to mythology, I'm a big Star Trek fan, as anyone who listens to my podcasts know. And I have a certain grace I give to like the first season or even the first series of Star Trek, the original series, because they're inventing the mythology as they go, right? So similarly, I think there are some absolutes for Superman, right? They get invented as we go, and after the first couple years, decade, let's say the first decade, right? Because when did the radio show come out, like in that decade area, there's a lot of formative stuff that was invented there and introduced there that stayed forever. Once that stuff cements itself, I do feel like there are some absolutes. But especially in those early days, there's a lot more, I feel there's a lot more leadway for that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny you mentioned the radio show. This also makes me laugh all the time that in the first telling of the origin on the radio show, it would change when they retold it. But in that first telling, Superman comes out of that rocket fully grown. He comes out an adult. He saves this little kid and his grandpa. And at the end, the kid is like, gee, mister, you should call yourself Clark Kent. And that's it.
That's efficiency of storytelling right there.
It's amazing. And then the last thing before we segue into this is, for all of the beats of the origin that we are going to pick apart and share our favorite takes on and all of that, there is something to be said, once again, for the purity and the simplicity of that opening page of All-Star Superman. Doomed planet, desperate scientists, last hope, kindly couple. And similarly, I'll extend that to a single panel from Doomsday Clock by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. A rocket arrives, the child is loved, Superman is made. So there's so much that we're going to be getting into, but at the same time, when you really reduce it to its most elemental components, beautiful. Mm-hmm. I'm very curious how often you and I will diverge in this, because the same age, we have similar touchstones in our fandom. Obviously, Smallville looms large for both of us. I feel like we have relatively similar sensibilities, but I'm sure we'll part in certain respects. And I'm also curious when and where we are going to break with our beloved Smallville, because as much as we love that decade-long origin story, neither one of us is overly precious about it. So for anyone who's like, oh, all their answers are just going to be Smallville, I don't think so.
No, I feel more leadway to be less precious about it, since I'm like the Smallville guy, I mean, so it's like, of course I love Smallville. That goes without saying. But, if we're making the perfect, ideal Superman origin, right? I mean, not all that stuff on Smallville is going to fly. There will be no Henry James Olsen, for example, in my ideal Superman origin story. So,
all right, fair enough. I want to give a shout out in our Facebook group and on our Facebook page. We had a few folks who basically answered all 13 questions from that article. Obviously, I can't read everyone's responses, but shout out to Todd, Robert, Aaron, and Martin. And we also had a few folks, namely Javi, Mando, and Patrick, who shared general observations and thoughts on the origin. So if anyone wants to read what those folks submitted, head on over to our Facebook group and our Facebook page. Naturally, I've divided these 20 questions into 3 categories: Krypton, Smallville, and Metropolis. So starting on our doomed planet here, what I'd like to tackle first, my friend, what is your preferred depiction of the planet in terms of its aesthetic and its social structure? Obviously, there are certain tellings that get more into that than others, but before we even get to the destruction of the planet, what do you like to see in terms of Krypton itself?
Well, aesthetically, I like it to be truly alien, like a technology beyond our understanding. There's a I'm going to sound pretentious here, but give me a second. So Arthur C. Clarke, he has that famous quote, like, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? I like that for Krypton, right? And that, that really explains the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve Krypton. It's like science fantasy, right? Because there's a reason that this crystalline Krypton hasn't gone away since 1978, because it's iconic, it's alien, right? And it's like, I feel like you either have to go all in with that or do something else. When they try to mix them, like, the Supergirl TV show, for example, it's like, I don't know, you can't have like a control console in like your Crystal Fortress. Like, if something feels off, and I understand why they do it, because they want to mix the the iconic stuff with the comic accurate Silver Age kind of stuff. But I like Krypton that's really mythic, right? It's more heaven / Mount Olympus as opposed to like Tomorrowland or Flash Gordon kind of sci-fi. So that's how I feel. And that said, I do like a little more tangibility, if that makes sense. Like Smallville tried to give it to us. Smallville is another example where they tried to mix them together, but they just didn't have the budget to achieve it, especially by the time they got there in the series, right? Like season 9, we see Krypton flashbacks, and they just, they did their best. They just didn't have the budget to show that scope. So I don't need. So aesthetically, I would go with the crystals, right? But like sociologically, right? I don't need like guilds and classes. But I did love the show Krypton, as we discussed on this very podcast. But I think that's an interesting aspect. I don't necessarily need it, but I do think it's interesting. So I'm kind of, I'm not. You can sell me on any sort of like societal structure for Krypton, but aesthetically, I do gravitate towards. I do like, and I do understand why the Superman the movie aesthetic has taken over the default Krypton aesthetic. So that's my answer for here.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that crystal motif is iconic, but if I'm thinking about those instances where the Krypton part of the story really grabbed me, and I've said this before, it really wasn't until Snyder's Man of Steel where I was like, okay, I'm really on board with the Krypton portion of this storyline. Maybe this is a little bit of a cheat, but we know, and we talked about how initially the Krypton television series was going to be part of that Zack Snyder cinematic universe. And even though they ended up making it its own thing, you can see some points of connection there. So I kind of look at the Snyder Krypton and what we see on the Krypton television series, and specifically beyond the aesthetic, moving into that social hierarchy, these stark class divisions, which we also see to great effect in the Absolute Superman book as well, which I've been a big fan of. And that's one aspect of the story that I do think is important. I mean, it's one thing for there to be this contrast between Kryptonian society and Earth, and they can be more advanced in terms of their technology and whatnot. But I do like for there to be something going on, for there to be some meat on the bone in terms of that Kryptonian society, and having that social class system and the way that plays out, specifically on that sci-fi series and in Absolute Superman, I just think is really interesting. I don't really get as much out of the version of the story where it's like, oh, they're just this advanced society and everything's great and it's this scientific utopia. It's like, okay, that's fine. But if we're really going to dig in here, I like to have that. So for me, yeah, I would say Snyder, sci-fi Krypton, Absolute Universe. That's kind of the Krypton that I gravitate towards. And I guess, I mean, this wasn't an origin story, but I will also cite the New Krypton saga from the post-Infinite Crisis comic book landscape, because they really got into the guilds and the different garb that accompanies each of them. And it was, I thought, an efficient way to sort of reconcile the Byrne aesthetic with some of the other iterations of Krypton we had seen in the comics, to just sort of say, okay, that Byrne aesthetic, that's the science guild, but then we have the art guild and the religious guild and so on. So I like that to be part of the Krypton setup.
There is a lot of story to be mined from when there is a culture clash, when Superman interacts with Kryptonians, like when he goes into Kandor or wherever, right? Or Kandorians come to Earth, like in Smallville in season 9, for example. Like there is something to be said for that. Like, he wants to find his people, and he's like, "Whoa, that's not how I do things." And they're like, "Well, this is how we do things, so get in line." So that's it. And now I think I have a deeper answer maybe as we get into like Superman should be born on Krypton or Earth, and I have some more maybe stronger thoughts about that as far as how their society goes. But it's a great character motivator, like General Zod, right? The Man of Steel General Zod is, I love all the Zods, but he probably has the strongest motive and most understandable motivation because of the class system and what he was born to do and all that sort of thing. Although I do push against like the like chosen one trope, which we'll get into here in a second with our next probably question. And that's where I'm like, that's the only thing where I'm like, do I want the Krypton where you put your DNA in a box and then you get a baby? Like, I mean, I don't know if I want that. And to me, I guess I equate that with the guild system. Yeah. And maybe that's why I'm not so hot on it as maybe you, but I do like and respect the stories that it can generate.
So that might propel us to another question, but I'll just say really quickly, that whole idea of the birthing matrix and the birthing chambers and children having a predetermined role in society and all of that, I like that specifically because it points to something else that I do consider an essential ingredient, which is Jor-El and Lara rebelling in a really meaningful way. And obviously trying to spread the word about the impending destruction of the planet is a key instance of that. But I like the idea that even beyond that, there's some act of rebellion on their part, including taking their child or having a natural birth, right? As opposed to the normal way of things at that
heresy.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you were pointing to this. Our next question here, and it's funny because some of the questions that are on the list are like they're only on the list because of one creator who had an idea.
Yes.
And then it takes root and it becomes a thing, and then we have to address it. So our next question here is whether or not Kal-El should be born on Krypton or on Earth. And the main reason why this is here is because of John Byrne's Man of Steel reboot, where you had the child growing in its gestational matrix, but didn't actually get born until he arrived on the planet Earth. We're truly making him a citizen of Earth and the United States, which was in keeping with the whole mindset of that reboot. But where do you land on this?
Well, specifically, I think he should not be born on Earth. I think that birthing matrix is weird. It's also very strange. All these years later, Superman and Lois, the television show, did that. They were heavily influenced by the Triangle era comic books, which we all enjoyed because I know that character in this storyline. That's great, but like, it's so weird to see that like in live action, like 30 years later. Like I thought we moved on from that. So it was interesting that they did that in live action there. But just to take a half step back, right? I don't like Man of Steel, like making Superman like the Codex and the Chosen One. Like I don't think we need that. I think those are interesting for individual stories, right?
Sure.
But if we're telling like the ultimate version, the iconic ultimate version of Superman's origin and whatnot, we don't need that. So I would not say that. Now, I have kind of a strong taker. Talk about one version of something, doing something specifically. I will take it a step further. Not only was he born on Krypton, I don't think he should even be a newborn or a baby when he is sent to Earth. I point us, friends, to Superman the Animated Series.
Yes,
right?
yes.
He is 3 years old, right? And most versions of the origin, he arrives on Earth when he's 3. So I want him to be in suspended animation on his trip. So both for biological and like, psychological reasons. Because like, I don't like, yeah, the space fantasy aspect that I mentioned earlier kind of allows me to be like, okay, I guess they took care of his food and his bathroom and all the nitty gritty stuff. It's like, I just don't like the fact there's a baby in a spaceship for 3 years, regardless of how time space works or whatever. He is obviously in that ship in his own time for 3 years. And I just don't like that. And it's such a standard thing. Even in our beloved Smallville, we see he's put a little baby in the ship and he comes out, he's a little guy, Superman the movie, right? All these versions, right? I guess Man of Steel, we don't really see the spaceship land, so we don't know. No. Maybe he was a baby when he came out. So that's where I am, right? And you don't remember anything till you're like 4 anyway, for the most part, so he wouldn't remember Krypton, right? And also, look, I mean, you're a father, you can speak to this more than I can, but it impacts the dynamic of the Jor-El and Lara relationship with him because, I can't speak to that, but I can imagine it would be harder to give up a 3-year-old who you have raised and lived with for multiple years. And I'm not saying it's not heartbreaking to give up a newborn baby. Let's for the record. That is very heartbreaking. But it's like, it's so many of these versions, he's literally just born. And then like a week later, they're sending him off. And I just think there's something there to him being on Krypton and being, 3 years older. So there's that front. And again, there's the whole, like, I think suspended animation is the way to go instead of like growing up 3 years in a spaceship. So that is one of my stronger takes, which goes against the grain. I think all these origins, for the most part, I think Superman the Animated Series, unless I'm wrong, might be the only one where you specifically see like a toddler age. Toddlers 3? I don't know.
Yeah.
Know. So a toddler age child instead of a newborn being put in the ship. So that's my answer. I would really lean into that, and I would embrace that in future interpretations if they go that route.
Right on. No, I hear you. And so first and foremost, yeah, I never liked this idea of Burns of Kal-El not being born until he arrives on Earth. And look, like we talked about at length, that was a take that was really leaning into and emphasizing the importance of the earthly side, that human upbringing. And I get that. And there are aspects of that obviously resonate with me and help shape how I see the character. But I do think it's very important that he is born and lives some part of his early life on Krypton, because he is this child of two worlds, and it's perfectly normal and natural. And I actually prefer, right, for the earthly side to be predominant, given the fact that he was raised here, but he is still a child of two worlds. And I think having that early part of his life on Krypton is important. And there's such an emotional resonance to Jor-El and Lara parting with their child. It does not land the same when it's genetic matter in a matrix. So we need the baby on Krypton, at least a baby. I don't disagree with you. And it's funny because as you were starting to say, I knew exactly where you were going. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, but I knew where you were going with that, because that's something that always strikes me when I rewatch that 3-part opening to Superman the Animated Series, is that, yeah, he is a toddler. And it's funny. That's why I'm so glad we're doing this, because I never thought about this angle specifically, but I am with you, right? Like if it's a choice between the baby going into the rocket and then aging a few years in transit versus already being a few years old and then being in suspended animation, yeah, I opt for the latter. Mm-hmm. I opt for the latter. And yes, under any circumstance, it would be impossible to put your child in a rocket and send them off. But yeah, I mean, there is a difference between a newborn versus a kid who's 2 or 3 and is starting to talk and interact in a different way. So I think that that hits differently. So like I said, obviously in most instances, Kal-El is born on the planet Krypton, but we do have a major deviation that defined a whole era of the character, hence its place on this list here.
So interesting that their push in that era was the last son of Krypton. I'm like, but he wasn't even born on Krypton. So
yeah, absolutely. But you think about origin after origin and that moment of Jor-El and Lara putting the baby in the rocket. You can't lose that. I mean, obviously we did for an extended period of time, but
yeah, we did.
But no, that to me is an essential ingredient there. Okay. Our next question here, also largely on this list because of a single creator. Although I can't lay all of this at the feet of Brian Michael Bendis. There are other instances. In fact, the very recent My Adventures with Superman took a similar track with Brainiac. But the question is, should Krypton's destruction be a purely natural event, a long-term consequence of man's actions, or a villainous plot a la Rogol Zaar in the relatively recent Bendis run, or Brainiac in the very recent My Adventures with Superman? And it's funny, I went back to Action 1 in that first page, and there it's just a planet dying of old age, right? So we've had different iterations. I would say probably the most common, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the most common is some version of an unstable core. Usually something with the core that is causing that. But then we do have these instances where it's full on a villain destroying the planet. What's your preference here?
I've heard you like snidely comment about Rogol Zaar so many times on this podcast, so I'm pretty sure you're not going to pick that one. But no, I would say a combination of like the first two, right? Like it's a natural event, but it's brought on by the Kryptonians' actions. Nature running its course, but it's also like a hubris, vanity, willful ignorance of the Kryptonians to not see it or not believe it. It absolutely should not be the direct cause of a villain. Like Rogol Zaar or Zod, for example, on Smallville, they imply Zod is the one who destroyed Krypton, which I never cared for. Brainiac is the only one I'm okay with there being some ambiguity about. Like in the Brainiac story in the comics, he like comes by and he gets Kandor. And he's like, well, you guys are gonna blow up soon anyway, so I'm just gonna go. Right? I mean, that's kind of the ambiguity there is interesting. I mean, also there's Superman the animated series. Again, I point to Superman the animated series. I think it just had such a great fresh take on all this stuff, and Brainiac being like willingly keeping information. Like, if Brainiac's going to be from Krypton, it willingly keeping that information from them and then being so dependent on technology, right? Do they believe it? I think you could have a real like cautionary tale about science and society and AI, and it's just ripe for the taking. I mean, that was ahead of its time 30 years ago now, Anthony, that Superman the Animated Series came out. So if you're going to go that villain is more responsible route, the only path forward there, I think, is Brainiac is your computer, and you trust it blindly, and someone like who has some agency of their own, like Jor-El, tries to say, "Hey guys, should we check those numbers?" And no, trust the machine knows, Dwight. And they drive into the lake, And to quote The Office, if you know what I'm talking about, everybody. But that's the one villain I'm cool with, like there being some hand in the destruction, not even like actively, but passively, as seen in Superman the Animated Series with Brainiac. So that's my take on it.
I'm with you. I think for me, I want it to be a mostly natural occurrence. I feel like it's more mythic that way. I feel like going the Rogol Czar or Brainiac in My Adventures route undermines that mythic quality to the story. However, and this ties in with what you're saying here, because we're on the same page, there is an element of Krypton being hoisted by its own petard that I do think is important and can manifest in different ways. And I think, like you're citing with Superman the Animated Series, I think that's very effective, where Brainiac purposely keeps this knowledge about the planet's destruction from getting out. So he has a hand, at least in preventing the planet from being able to save itself. But there is a difference between that and actively causing it. The other route that we get that I do quite like is a long-term consequence of man's actions. So I know a moment ago I spoke against the Byrne reboot, but here's an instance where I actually like the Byrne explanation. I think we get more of this when we get into the World of Krypton miniseries, but essentially you find out the terrorist organization Black Zero, they had detonated this atom bomb generations ago, and that kind of laid the groundwork for this unstable core centuries later. So the idea that it's this long-term consequence, or I think better yet, you look at the current, once again, I'm citing Absolute Superman, but the environmental impact of Krypton's actions having this unintended consequence. I think any of those work for me. So primarily natural, but a long-term consequence of man's actions. Like you said, a cautionary tale. I think there's really something to be said for that, but definitely not Rogol Czar. And I would argue, if you look at the new history of the DCU, I forget if it's in the main story or the back matter, but man, boy, as I poring over the word choice in this book, it says like Rogol Czar, who claimed credit for Krypton's. So even DC is like, he said he destroyed it. Oh, we don't really know. And that's my story too.
All right.
Okay. This next one, this is an instance I suspect, you might surprise me, but I suspect we're going to break with our beloved Smallville in this one. So our next question here, in terms of how specifically Kal-El's ship is aimed, I would say on average, or most commonly, we see the rocket directed toward Earth. I feel like that's what we see more often than not. But there are instances where it gets more specific. In the Byrne reboot, for example, there's the classic image of Jor-El showing Lara the Midwest and this bare-chested farmer and her recoiling in horror. Savages. So that's an instance. And once again, very much in the Reagan era America, right? And that was such a big part of the Man of Steel era of the character. I'm an American, goddammit, that sort of thing. So there was an instance where the rocket was aimed at the heartland of America. Then, in Smallville, in the season 3 episode Relic, we get this whole backstory about Jor-El going on walkabout, a young Jor-El going on walkabout in Smallville, having this relationship with Lana's great aunt, and actually having an encounter with Hiram Kent. And we end on this note of Clark saying, I don't think it was random that my ship landed here. I think you were chosen. How specifically do you like the rocket to be directed?
I think you should intentionally send it to Earth because that's like, oh, well, he'll be fast, he'll be invulnerable, he'll need that advantage to survive, as they say in Superman the movie, right? That's a great reason to send him somewhere like that, right? So intentionally sent to Earth, nothing more specific. Not the Midwest, not Kansas, not Smallville, and certainly not the Kent farm, allegedly, right? Because that there's no Jor-El on Earth, no Jor-El meeting the Kents. No Kryptonian back and forth portals and just nonsense, right? I think Tom Welling likes that story, at least based off what he said on Talk. He said, "Hey, there's a very exciting thing about the mythology here." I remember him I don't remember exactly, but I remember his energy was very positive towards it. That's fine. I mean, it's neither here nor there, but I think. It loses some of the mythicness. I'm talking about I want Krypton to be heaven or Mount Olympus, right? So like Moses being sent up the river, that's the inspiration for Siegel and Schuster, for Kal-El, right? Being put in the rocket, right? So the unknown future, right? And that should be the template, right? They shouldn't know exactly the coordinates of the property of the land that I was on back when I was a teenager, and I had a good weekend there 40 years ago. I'm gonna send my son there. Just I don't know. Look, Smallville, it's a TV show. They wanted to add some layers to it. I understand. Like, it doesn't, ruin anything for me. Obviously, we both love Smallville. But I think that was just way too specific. So I don't even think they should see photos of Kansas. I think Earth. Earth is where it is, right? Can you even be that specific when you're shooting a rocket across galaxies, right? So that's where I'm on it.
Yeah, I'm with you. The thing about Smallville, and I didn't even make this a question, but the whole idea of Kryptonians exploring Earth, right? Which maybe there are other instances, but obviously Smallville is the main one that we think of. And, it gave them some fodder, more than some fodder, across multiple seasons with the stones and the caves and all of that. But generally, that's not my preference. And that moment at the end of Relic where Clark's like, I think you and Mom were chosen. I like that specific moment, but I would have preferred if it had been more of just kind of an idea, a notion, a theory. But once you actually see all of that backstory, then it becomes very specific, and I don't care for that.
Smallville itself in the pilot, right? Clark says to Jonathan, "I'm glad you and Mom were the ones who found me." And he says, "We didn't find you, Clark. You found us." I'm like, oh, that's so sweet and wholesome. It's like, no, your alien dad programmed you to crash here. It's fine. Half step back too, right? Krypton. I'm not totally against Kryptonians ever being on Earth in the past. I think as we come to know in Smallville, there's portals, and they're going back and forth, and Lara and Kara and Zor-El are going back and forth. And I think there's something interesting to be said, like, what if an ancient Kryptonian spaceship crashed on Earth, which I think is Man of Steel, what that implies.
Yeah,
right
basically.
But yeah, it would be cool to did you know that they crashed in Egypt or whatever, right? I don't know, right? So, millennia ago. I'm not saying Earth is totally off limits. I don't want anyone in Clark's family or the immediate past going back and forth between portals to Earth, because that just negates just the mythicness of the origin story.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like I said, I feel like more often than not, Jor-El and Lara, they have Earth picked out. But I was looking back through my favorite telling of the origin, Birthright, and they do ultimately land on Earth, but it's as last second as you can get. It's like previously they're just trying to find planets where life could survive. And then at the last minute, I guess Jor-El has this idea of as risky as this is, if we send him to a planet with a yellow sun, at least he'll have all of these advantages. He could survive. And so Earth is this last minute pick, this shot in the dark after their long search. So that, or even if they have Earth picked out farther in advance, I'm okay with that. Despite how much I love Smallville, I don't prefer that take. But I do have to mention, because if I don't, someone will reach out and say it. So I have not yet read any of Elliot S. Magin's Superman novels, but I know people hold them up, and we're going to be getting there. They're on the list. And recently when Magin fan Daniel Sanchez was here and we were talking about Silver Age Supergirl, he brought up how in, I believe it's that first Magin novel, there's all this business with Jor-El making contact with Albert Einstein and initially envisioning that the baby would be sent to Albert Einstein, but Einstein having this idea of, well, it's not just knowledge that's necessary to raise a child. Again, I haven't read this yet, so apologies if I'm not 100% on this. But basically, Einstein recognizing that love is the most important, and then they ultimately land on the Ken. So I think that's an early, that's the blueprint, right? Like there's this instance of there being a bit more of a selection process. It's intriguing, but not what I would want for my prime ultimate origin.
Yeah, like offshoot. Look, explore these things and like offshoots. But if we're trying to tell like the purest ideal baseline Superman origin, okay, that's where we land.
We have a sub question by our mutual friend Matt Truex on the subject of the rocket via Instagram.
Shout out to Matt.
Yep, Lois and Clark. Matt says, "Which spaceship design is your favorite, and why are you so wrong for not choosing the Lois and Clark version?" He's assuming we're not.
Yeah,
I don't know, but where do you have an ideal design of the ship? Because I'll be perfectly honest, it's not. This doesn't keep me up at night. I can't say I've given a lot of thought to this.
I like that we've evolved past the Flash Gordon rocket, which was kind of the default for a while. Like, yeah, it's fine. I mean, that's when these things were invented, right? But I do think I want it to have some identity of its own. I mean, Smallville, that ship was such an important thing those first 2 years. And that's like the third design of it, by the way. If you look in the pilot, it looks very different when it's coming to Earth. It looks very different when it's crashed. It's like this they call it the Artichoke spaceship. And then they ended up calling it, they being, I guess, the internet, us on message boards, the Lawn Dart spaceship is what they kind of settled on for the one that makes has the most screen time. I don't know, like if you're going again, if I'm going for my mythic iconic approach, which seems to be what I'm going for, there's something about that crystalline Star of David like spaceship, right, from Superman the movie. And then by the time it crashes on Earth, it's just this like little ball, and then it just disintegrates. And I don't know. I just like you. I don't have a strong preference about it. I know Matt, and for those who don't know Matt loves the Lois and Clark spaceship. He has made models. He's obsessed over it and loved the different designs of that show that they have for the spaceship, because they had a really, as Matt tells, they had a really cool intricate one, and then apparently they lost the prop at some point, and they had to throw one like together in season 3 at the last minute because they couldn't find the prop. So he's specifically mentioning the ones like the in the first couple of seasons of the show, and it's a good spaceship. I like the Lois and Clark spaceship. I don't know, like I don't think there's one. I can't think of one, Anthony, where I'm like, oh, that design sucked. I hate it.
Yeah,
so that's where I am.
Honestly, I'm with you, and I don't dislike the Lois and Clark one. Maybe I'll go with that just to honor our friend here. I'll add another sub question related to the rocket, and then we'll circle back to a larger question. But how do you like the rocket to arrive on Earth? Does it land gently, a la in a lot of the pre-crisis comics, and once again, Superman the Animated Series, or does it come in hot and we get a crash land? Because for me, there's a part of me that's like, oh, it actually makes more sense if it just lands, given Jor-El's scientific prowess, and also this helps account for why the baby isn't discovered, right? If it just sort of lands silently. I mean, there's still the question of radar and everything, but going back to this mythic quality to the story, in my mind, it's got to come in hot. I think we need a crash landing. It's covering such a long distance. We don't have a specific target. Who knows whatever else it encounters along the way. So for me, I like a crash landing. It's got to come in hot.
Well, you know what else will disguise a baby's arrival and hide it from radar, Anthony? A meteor shower.
100%.
I think every interpretation from now on, 2001 onward, from when Smallville premiered, needs to have the meteor shower. It's genius. It covers up the spaceship. It causes some destruction. It also brings kryptonite everywhere, so you can explain where that came from. Like, your mileage may vary on how many meteor freaks it makes, but the fact that kryptonite arrives on Earth then makes perfect sense because it's in the wake of the rocket ship. So I think it crashes in a meteor shower. I think that is, to me, that's an essential. That is. But we've been kind of hard on Smallville out of the gate here. That is an essential addition to the mythology from Smallville, the meteor shower.
It's wild that hasn't been universally adopted across all telling since then, right? For all the reasons you just laid out. Like I agree with all of that. Okay, the bigger question though about the rocket, this is question number 5 officially here. And this grinds my gears when this comes up. Does Lara not get in the rocket because there's no room and only the baby can fit, or because she chooses not to because her place is with her husband by his side as the planet explodes?
Well, I think it's crazy how often this is a plot point, right? Like it's not just it's in multiple versions, her reasoning, right? But no, she doesn't go because like it's an experimental prototype and there's only room for Kal-El, and just leave it at that. If there were space, women and children first, the lifeboats, right? That's what you do. You put the mom and the child, and the man goes down with the ship, and that's what would happen if there was space for both of them. It's crazy that's even a discussion. They wisely kind of kept making the rocket smaller and smaller, where it was just for Kal-El. That's such an odd wrinkle that appears more than once.
So here's the thing. I feel like the most frequent instances of that happen decades ago, but then in Superman the Animated Series, we get it again, right? This whole idea about my place is by your side. Yep. And so that's why, like, part of me thinks, well, okay, there was maybe more of an, I don't know, antiquated idea. And that's why we saw that in the 40s and 50s and not so much. But, you know, Superman the Animated Series, 30 years ago, but still relatively recent.
Yeah.
The thing is, the idea of wanting to show the love between Jor-El and Lara and tie them together in a more tangible way, I'm all for that. I think the way to do that, and I think particularly more recent iterations have been a lot better about this. Birthright is a good example where it's like she's helping to plot the course of this rocket. Like, you make her more involved with the baby's escape. And so she's not just standing there. You give her something to do, even something like the Byrne reboot. Like I said, it's important to me that there's this active rebellion there. You have a society where the people don't touch. They're almost never in the same room together. Everything's over Zoom screens. And then in those final moments, they touch hands. Like, that's huge. And that to me is a perfect way to, like, give Lara something to do, minimal as it is, show that rebellion, tie them together. But especially now having a family, it's like that idea that Jor-El would even accept that. You know, the fact that Lara would allow the baby to go off alone, the fact that Jor-El would accept that, like, none of that makes any sense to me as a husband and a father. It's insane.
Jor-El would be like, well, if you're not going to go, I'm going to go.
That's the Elseworld. Well, we are getting an Elseworlds, a different spin where it's Jor-El who lands on it. It's not Jor-El and the baby, but yeah.
It hasn't come out yet, has it?
As of this recording, no, it has.
Okay, I want to check that out. That's interesting to me. I'm like, sure, why not? That's interesting.
Yeah, Father of Tomorrow, where it's Jor-El, not Kal-El, who arrives on Earth. And then we're also getting an Elseworld story, Supergirl Survive, where we actually get to see, right, this whole idea of Supergirl was the one who was supposed to arrive and raise Kal-El. We're actually going to see that play out. So... but yeah, and anytime it comes up, man, that this business about Lara choosing not to get in, annoys me. Mm-hmm. Okay. Our last Krypton-related question, it's a big one here. And it's this whole notion of whether or not Kal-El should be the quote-unquote last son of Krypton, which, as we have talked about, does allow room for other Kryptonians to exist. And we have seen this manifest in many ways. Krypto and Supergirl and the Phantom Zone and the Kandorians. Or, like we saw in the Byrne post-crisis era, should he be the sole survivor? Or just more basically, how many other Kryptonians out there are you okay with?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I've been going first in all these. I have a pretty radical suggestion to talk about here, inspired by your current run of Digging for Kryptonite, a Supergirl fan journey.
Okay.
So you go first, and I'll kind of have a wild take I'm excited to discuss with you, but take it away.
All right, I'm very intrigued. And by the way, our Supergirl coverage will continue, but for the milestone 250th, I wanted to circle back to the Man of Steel himself. But for me, look, this is one of those things, as I've said countless times, I grew up in that era where it was just Kal-El, and we got the Matrix Supergirl, and the Pocket Universe Zod, and the Kandor that was made up of aliens from all these different planets. Like, I grew up with different versions of all these things, although the concepts were still there. For me, I do not need or want Kal-El to be the sole survivor. I think that when you introduce Krypto and Kara Zor-El, and the Kandorians and the Phantom Zone, I think it opens up storytelling possibilities. I think it should be done judiciously. I don't think we want sort of a limitless amount of other Kryptonians out there. And this is sort of, I think, my biggest requirement is that there always be some element of separation, whether it's physical and or emotional. So Kandor is a great example where there's this physical separation and, like you were getting at before, this culture clash. And in the comics right now, they're at odds. Like the Kandorians, they hate Superman. Phantom Zone, obviously home to all of these criminals. So when someone does come from the Phantom Zone, we have conflict. With Supergirl, the fact that she has endured this trauma and has this life on Krypton that she remembers, whereas Clark doesn't. There's an element of separation there. Not that they're not close or anything like that, but I think that element of separation. So it's offering something, but there's always a little bit of a distance or a removal there. I think that's really important. But I don't think he needs to be the sole survivor. So that's where I land on that. So I'm all for give me Krypto, give me Supergirl, all that stuff. How about yourself? I'm very curious.
So like baseline, yeah, that's fine. I do think I'm actually fine without Kandor. Like I'm totally fine without it. Like I know it's a big Silver Age thing. They bring it back in their new creative ways. Phantom Zone, have a few villains in there for sure, but you just can't have endless characters from Krypton showing up because it loses all meaning. Like it's separation in that respect as well. So here we go. Here's some bigger ideas. Krypto is tough because I love dogs, I really do. But it's like like at the time it's like, oh, it's kind of like how we send animals up in space rockets and test them. It's like we've moved on from that, and I don't know anymore. Like I don't know. They have found kind of creative ways for Superman to have a dog, like Smallville and Rusty and Shelby and all these other dogs, right? So like there are ways. It doesn't have to be an alien super dog. Maybe he does, like Superman the animated series. He's got some weird alien that Bizarro calls Krypto.
Right.
There are fun ways to reference Krypto without it being, yes, this was our family dog that we sit in space with you. And I love Super Pets. That's like when he crawls in the little pod with him, it's an emotional moment. Okay, right? So anyway, here's a bigger picture idea I had, especially, again, inspired by kind of listening and revisiting some of these Supergirl stories you're talking about, Matrix Supergirl, right? So here we go. Big picture now that we have the whole Superman timeline, right? Just Superman from Krypton, okay? There is no Superboy when Superman's a Superboy. His sons become Superboy, right? So Superboy is accounted for then as Superman's sons, Jonathan and Jordan, if you want to do the Superman and Lois route or whatever, right?
Okay.
And so that means there's no kid Superboy. Kid Superman is not Superboy. There's no clone Superboy either, right? No more Connor Kent. We're taking him off the table, right? Okay.
All right.
Oh, I know. This is just my, this is an offshoot.
Yeah,
this is okay. So, like if you said, hey, make it Superman TV show, this is how it would make it different, right? Supergirl, it becomes the Matrix Supergirl and Superboy equivalent. Lex Luthor creates Supergirl as a clone of Superman, and she serves him for a while. Maybe he implants her with memories or something. You don't know. He gives her a costume, makes up a fall. Us as the viewers would think, oh, it's Kara from Krypton, right? But then they do it as the CW love to do. They use your comic book knowledge against you. No, guess what? She's a clone Lex Luthor made. You thought it was Supergirl. It's not. It's exactly what they would do, right? And if you want to go even deeper, right? I thought about this too. Like, if you want to go even deeper, you make it where she's in the image of Lex's deceased sister, Lena, who he loved, and he recreated her. I just think there's a lot of story potential there, where you can have this Lex Luthor aligned Supergirl. Does she know she's a villain? Is she a secret agent? You can explore all those things maybe, and then eventually she finds out what kind of person Lex is, and Superman brings her into his family anyway. I just thought these were some fun ideas if you want to just to mix everything up, mix all the stuff up that we know. And because I just think right now we're so redundant on the Superboy front, right? Because we have, there's young Superman Superboy, there's Connor Kent Superboy, he has these sons. We talked about, whatever kid he has, whoever that kid is, do we call him Superman? Because then there's two Superman, right? They do the son of Kal-El, they're trying to find a name for him. So anyway, thinking of all these things, I think that would be a fun way to mix up all the stuff we know. And with all that being said, Superman in this scenario is the true sole survivor of Krypton. So,
okay, all right. No, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, and I mean, certainly, what you proposed for Supergirl would be a way. I mean, very Superman and Lois-esque of subverting the audience's expectations. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't fully co-sign, but I hear where you're coming from on it, and I like the creativity.
Well, I sympathize now with those post-crisis writers, because thinking about this question, I was like, well, I don't know. I want to have a Supergirl and a Superboy. These are iconic names. Regardless of the characters, the names, they transcend the characters, right? How many Supergirls and Superboys are there across the years of different versions? And so they're important pieces of the mythology, but there is something about wait, so he had a cousin and Jor-El had a brother named Zor-El? I don't know. Like, and Zor-El, I mean, we've talked about it on and off over the years. Like, what is he anymore? Like, Zod has basically filled that role now, so he's kind of a redundant character. Hey, you've teased it before. I'd tune into a Zor-El episode if you ever do one.
All right, it is actually coming, so we are.
Yes.
It's on the list. It'll be part of our Supergirl coverage because in the New 52 and Rebirth eras, they re-envisioned Zod as Cyborg Superman.
Zor-El, yeah.
Zor-El, I'm sorry, Zor-El. Yeah.
I thought that was pretty clever. Like, when I was reading the new 52, it's funny because, like, Brainiac's like, well, we'll take the lesser brother and we'll do this stuff. I thought, you know what? You're doing something with him.
Yeah.
Because what else are you to do with him, right? Do something with these characters. So.
Yeah, so we'll explore
So there's
that.
my wild fan theory. If I was in charge of Superman TV show, that's what I'd do.
Okay, right on. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. I'm a parent, which means that a family-friendly comic shop is a must, and there's none better than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. Follow them on social media and at awyeahcomics.com for news about signings, live sales, and much more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. My comic shop closed over a decade ago, but if there's one place where I feel that same sense of camaraderie, it's Fat Moose Comics, New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store, led by current owner Sean Hendricks. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany, New Jersey, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. All right, I think we have addressed the Krypton portion of our origin story here, hopefully to the audience's satisfaction. And of course, I invite the audience, submit your answers to these questions. If there were any aspects of this, any questions we didn't tackle, share them with us on social media, and we can weigh in. All right, now we move to Smallville.
Yes.
And this first question pertains to the emergence of young Clark's powers, how and when they manifest. And we actually have a question from one of our patrons, Brian Dempsey, who says, what is your preferred scientific explanation of why Kryptonians have powers on Earth? The lighter gravity and dense molecular structure, anti-gravity neural network, just the rays of a yellow sun. Each origin comes with its own explanation. And then he says, and 250 episodes. Geez, Anthony, why aren't there more? What are you doing with your time? You're not letting family, work, sleep, or God forbid, Batman impact your output, are you? In all seriousness, I can't believe there are this many episodes and there's so much still to do. Looking forward to the next 250. I very much appreciate that. And I'll say for myself, as far as this question specifically, I'm good with just the yellow rays of the sun. I'm fine if we get more specific with the density of the molecular structure. That's fine. I don't really need that though. The yellow sun is typically enough for me. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think they use them kind of interchangeably, like, the rays of the sun and his dense molecular structure. I'm like, well, which is it, right? Because
Right.
Is it the sun interacting with his physiology? Like, it is, right? So I do think they both are kind of connected. Obviously, if he wasn't from, a red sun has certain planets with gravity on it, and if he wasn't from there, then he wouldn't be what he was here. So I think they're all kind of combined, but if we want to really simplify it, it's the rays of the sun. Because when they put him with the red solar rays, which I think is a great kryptonite alternative to depower him.
Yes.
His molecular structure doesn't change, it's just different rays on him. So I think it's just to stick to the light spectrum. That's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as far as the powers, this is an instance where I'm going to gravitate toward Smallville, even though because of how long that series ran, we really delayed certain powers. But this general idea that they emerge throughout his adolescence and that they're not dissimilar from the changes that a normal human goes through during puberty, and the fact that in Smallville in particular, and then we saw this adopted in Superman's Secret Origin, the fact that sexual arousal triggers the heat vision. I thought that was just a great way to tell that part of the story. So that's what I gravitate towards. And I definitely don't need or want Super Baby a la those pre-crisis comics. That got too silly for my taste. How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think he should always be stronger, faster, more durable, right? But nothing super, right? His powers don't kick in until puberty, and then, not all at once. So, but, basically Smallville. I mean, did you expect me to say anything else? Look, as iconic and fun as it is in Superman the movie, where the baby holds up the car and he's got the little red blanket around him, like, dun, 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 like, it's cute, right? But I'm like, wait a minute. Does this baby have superpowers? Like I don't think that's really tenable when you have like another reason to not have him come to Earth till he's 3, right? Because how can you control a little baby? Again, I'm not a parent. You are. Can you imagine wrestling your kid around, run around the house? He's got superpowers. It's impossible, right? So a lot of reasons, but no power, no true superpowers beyond strength and speed and durability until he reaches puberty. I think it's a natural thing.
I mean, you mentioned that moment from Superman the movie with the truck, and I do hate to sacrifice that because it is so iconic. But
right?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think overall, stronger, faster, but then the more specific powers, the heat vision, the super hearing, the super breath, they kick in over time. And I think tying them into sort of these puberty-esque developments, I think is a fun, clever way to do it. And we want to have the Kents there to help train him and all of that. Like I love that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So that's an instance where we will cite Smallville. Okay. The TV show, of course. Yes. So this next one, this is a big one. And I guess given our fandom of the show, I feel like I kind of know what our answer will be, but maybe not. But this is something that I thought about a lot over the years here about whether the town of Smallville and that time in his life should be relatively peaceful, where, yes, he's learning to be a good neighbor and a good friend and whatnot, but should it be relatively peaceful, or should it be this gauntlet of trials that he has to go through? And it's funny because it's like the idea of Superboy, if my history is correct, I think Superboy was introduced in 45. So very early in the proceedings, did we get this idea that as a kid, he was having all of these adventures growing up. Obviously not the case prior to that, but very early on we get that. And all throughout the rest of those pre-crisis comics, Clark was Superboy. So he was having all of these adventures. But then you get something like Superman the movie. Now, we only visit with him in Smallville during that relatively brief time. Maybe we have to default to some headcanon and say he was having some sorts of adventures, but I don't get that sense. I get the sense it was a relatively peaceful time before in that instance. And then we get to something like the Smallville television series where he's battling meteor freaks and encountering virtually all of his future villains during that time. So what is your preference as far as how kind of adventurous and active that period is for him?
Well, it is interesting that Smallville, Alan Miles, who created Smallville, they cite Superman the movie and they cite Superman for All Seasons. This inspired us. I'm like, great, but did it? Because that's nothing like the Smallville of your show. So, but I think there's a healthy mix of both. The humanity of those stories inform Smallville, and that's the strength. That's where they pull it from, right? But then, of course, you have to have a story engine. You have to have villains and obstacles, and those things are necessary, right? So that's where that comes from. It's just funny to compare them both and act like one inspired the other. But I'd say a mix of both, right? Because it's not quite. I don't want quite the Norman Rockwell of Superman the movie where he deals with all he deals with is being an outsider and being bullied because of it. But I don't want the relentlessness of Smallville where there's not only meteor freaks, but as you said, he's met and fought pretty much most of his villains before he's even Superman. But we mentioned it before, but speaking of meteor freaks, right? I mean, we mentioned the meteor shower. You have to have the meteor shower. It's a genius move, right? Hides the spaceship, it provides weaknesses for Clark, and then finally it mutates humans into villains for Clark to fight. Maybe some villains, maybe some allies, you don't know, right? We see them all over the course of the show. I mean, Smallville, way too much. If it was for looking baseline Superman origin, he did way too much action, way too much stuff that would even compromise his secret identity. Honestly, if he's not being Superboy, if you're Clark Kent, occasionally we get a sheriff who comes into town and say, "Why are you on every crime report, Mr. Kent?" That sort of thing, right? So he's got to have a little bit of action, right? But it cannot be the gauntlet of Smallville as much as we enjoyed watching it week after week, right?
Yeah. I mean, I realize as we're saying this, I could and arguably should have included the Superboy question as part of this or right after it, but it is coming and that's its own piece that we'll address. But yeah, I mean, relentless is a perfect word because that is what it becomes in the TV series. But it's I look at Superman the movie and I look at those post-crisis comics whenever we would get flashbacks to the time in Smallville. And there were good stories. I mean, Dan Jurgens did a real standout issue of Adventures of Superman, the drunk driving issue. So it's not that you can't tell more slice of life stories of Clark in Smallville that show the forming of his character. You can, and we've seen instances of that, but I do also feel like that only gets us so far. I think, yes, there does need to be a bit more action here. So yes, maybe there's a balance between like Superman the movie versus the Smallville television series. So it's maybe somewhere in between. It's like we saw only the briefest glimpses on Superman and Lois, but Lana had all these references like, oh, is all this, are you why all those weird things happen all the time? It's like, what weird things? And we, of course, we put on our Smallville hats and we're filling in all the backstory. But yeah, I mean, maybe something along the lines of whatever they intended on Superman and Lois, maybe that's kind of the sweet spot here where it's like, yeah, this weird stuff happened, but not to the point where Clark shows up in Superman and Lois and they're like, oh, it's Superman.
Yeah,
all right.
Exactly.
All right. This is another huge one here. I call this Krypton 101, which is when and how should Clark learn about his true origins? Because obviously we've seen this manifest in different ways. I would argue kind of two of the biggest versions of this are the iterations where he learns where he comes from. He learns about Krypton and Jor-El and Lara before becoming Superman versus instances where he's already Superman and then the backstory is sort of filled in for him. So what do you tend to prefer on that front?
You know, as Krypton heavy as Smallville was, and I understand why, because like we know as the viewers, and so they want to include that in the story, right? I mean, I get it, right? And had they known they were going to run for 10 years, they would not have introduced Jor-El at the end of season 2. I have no doubt of that, right?
Right.
I'm kind of Kryptoned out, though, Anthony, to be honest with you. I think things like the George Reeves show, The Adventures of Superman, it's kind of refreshing where he's just Superman doing stuff. And he's not worried about where he came from and what his alien holographic dad has to say. And right. For me, I think it should be like that final rite of passage, though, into adulthood, right? A crystal comes on, right? He goes north. Jor-El's AI talks to him. So, basically Superman the movie, right? I'm a Superman the movie guy. So there's lots of story opportunities, right? To mine from Clark not knowing who he is or where he came from, right? Superboy explored some of that. Lois and Clark to a little lesser degree, like just looking for alien stories and just trying to piece that together. So that's where I am on it, right? I think like he shouldn't know when he's 15. I feel bad, like we're all like, well, Smallville, we love it, but I wouldn't have done it that way. But we understand why they did it that way. I just think that there's something about like him not knowing everything, and it kind of helps him decide his path for himself before he's being told by alien computer god dad.
Okay, and so I am a bit torn on this for exactly that reason. And I think when you look at those original Golden Age comics, where he doesn't even learn his backstory until years into the proceedings, where he first encounters kryptonite and then essentially time travels and views the events that led to his arrival on Earth. So we have that, and then obviously in the post-crisis era in Man of Steel, he doesn't learn his origins until that final issue of Man of Steel when he encounters the Jor-El hologram and gets that info dump. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, not until he's already Superman. And I think to your point, like in all of those instances, it really shows that he's choosing to do this because of the values and lessons he learned on Earth from his parents in Smallville and all the people there and all that business. And there is something to be said for that. I can't deny it. However, what I ultimately gravitate towards more in my heart is him having all of the pieces of himself in view before he makes that choice. And we'll get to a later question about, does Martha make the costume or does Jor-El just bestow it upon him, right? And so there are other sort of pockets to this that we'll address. But big picture, I like for him to have the full pieces of who he is and where he comes from. Because like I keep saying, he is of two worlds. And so I do want both of those to be known to him before he makes that choice. Now, more specifically, I do also like for there to be some element of a quest. I don't like in Superman the Animated Series and Superman Secret Origin in particular, where there's some device from the Rocket, he activates it and boom,
Beams into his head. Yeah.
He gets everything. And look, in those specific, as Superman the Animated Series in particular, that was an extremely clean and efficient way to do it. Perfectly fine. But generally, yeah, I do like for there to be some sort of quest. Like Snyder's Man of Steel, it's a very tangible quest. Like he ends up finding the ship. Like he's on this journey around the world. Birthright, it's more about finding himself and who he's going to be in the world. But I do like the idea of some sort of quest, but then ultimately having those answers. Although even in Birthright, he doesn't get the full answers until later after he's donned the costume from Lex.
Yeah.
Which I don't really like the version of the story like there and an American Alien where he learns
the villains tell him
from the villains. I don't like that.
It feels wrong. Yeah, it feels wrong.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. I think there's a lot of value and he becomes Superman. He chooses all this and then he learns. But for me, I like him to learn it first and then make that choice.
No, I think they're equally valid because even Superman the movie, right? It's like it's kind of like it's the hero's journey, right? It's a checkpoint. Like he's lost, he's confused, he knows a lot about himself, and then finding that puts it into focus for him, you know. So, but even then, like I know it's not quite a quest, but he does have to go up north on foot. Like there's some sort of journey there.
Yes.
So
I don't. Yeah, that's true. I mean, whether it's a full globetrotting adventure or I got to go north. Something. Our pal Jan asks a question here about the fortress. So this is a sub-question here. He says, I'm not sure how I'd handle the fortress. Sometimes the crystal to build it comes with his ship, and he creates it before becoming Superman. And sometimes a fully grown Superman comes across another Kryptonian MacGuffin that allows him to build the fortress, like in Morrison's Action Run or the Triangle Era. Like in Morrison's run in particular, it's like Brainiac's ship that he ends up taking over and he uses that as his fortress.
Suits and everything,
Exactly. Jan says, I like both of these tracks pretty equally, so I'm curious if you and Zach have opinions on how that should go. Now, I'm springing this on you. I've had this for, so I'll answer. I mean, even though I said the crystal motif, like I'm not married to that, but I do like the idea of throwing that crystal into the snow. Yeah. There's something about that. I don't like we see in the Morrison run where he kind of co-ops Brainiac's ship, or the Triangle Era where it's like built for him after he's already Superman. I don't like that as much. I think we're really sticking with this mythic idea. I like the crystal forming the fortress. I like that.
Well, I mean, there's no other version that puts such importance on the crystal that's the Superman movies, right? Yeah. I mean, that's especially the Donner cut, and that's his communication with Jor-El, and you even go to Superman 4, it's like the other crystal that brings it back to life and that sort of thing. So there's something about the importance of those crystals that are personalized to him, and I like that. But that is one thing about Man of Steel, like he has the keychain, if you call it, right, from Jor-El. Then like it's like, well, he just took some other ship, and there was so much discussion of like, wait, is that his fortress for years? Right. Online, because we're like, wait, he's going to build his own? No, that was it, the Kryptonian ship, and it became a pivotal thing in that entire trilogy, right? But I think a personalized crystal is the way to go, and it doesn't turn on until like it's that science fantasy I'm talking about. You've reached your 18th year as measured on Earth, right? There's something about that like into adulthood thing that activates it, and then he goes on his quest.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, even the series finale of Superboy was like the ship was activating because he had reached a certain level in his maturity. I didn't put this on the list, but I guess for lack of a more elegant way to phrase it, like how much Jor-El do we want? How much interaction should be possible? Because this too, we've seen spun differently. Like Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, great example with the orb there, where Jor-El is like, there are 5 messages that you were going to receive. Like we put a real hard number on that versus other iterations, Smallville namely, where it's just this ongoing conversation with the AI version of Jor-El. What's the sweet spot for you?
I think I like a little interactive AI, but it has to have limits, and you have to. There needs to be like a moment, because a moment that's always stuck with me. It's in the special edition of Superman the movie, right? Where he's talking to Jor-El. He's like, "If not for vanity, I could hold you in my arms," right? And he kind of reaches out, and then the hologram ends, and he kind of like, I don't know what it's such a blank slate of emotions that you can project onto it, but he feels sad, he feels lonely, he probably feels kind of dumb that he reached his arms out to hug this hologram. Like you mentioned that separation earlier. I think that's the separation you need. Like it can't be like turning on the computer and then just having a ghost dad, for lack of a better word, constantly. Like there needs to be some sort of lack of interactivity. Like it can tell you information and it's kind of a database, but then that also leads to like, you need it not to have all the knowledge, because when he encounters villains and stuff, I want him to like have to figure it out, and like he can't tell you every last thing about Brainiac's intentions because maybe it's not in the database. So there has to be a limit. I think there should be some interactivity of like a computer system, but not where like the literal god level Jor-El from Smallville. Even though, as I say this all the time, he tells Clark at least once, "We're not gods, Kal-El," but you are. You know what's going on in everybody's lives. You're deciding the wheels of fate and destiny, like way too far. So a simple, sophisticated computer program is all I want for the Kryptonian, the Jor-El or whoever. I'd like Laura to have a crystal too. Let's let her be able to talk to him, right?
Yeah. I think I'm not saying the Lois and Clark version is my ideal, but there's something about kind of putting a finite number on the messages or something to that effect that does kind of make sense. I also go back to, if we're really in the realm of AI Brainiac, and we've talked a lot about Brainiac, what Superman the Animated Series did, where that's the system that he's using when he needs to look up something about Krypton. So yeah, I don't like, I guess where we are on the same page of just like this endless back and forth with the AI. Because then at a certain point, I mean, that was something I didn't love about Superman and Lois. I mean, I really didn't care for their Jor-El. The Lara was preferable at least.
Same here.
But there too, it was just like a bit too much at a certain point.
He's like, how was your earthly wedding ceremony, my son? I was like, this is so weird.
Exactly. Yeah, that was too far for me. And then another one I'm springing on you, but we have to address this. Yep. Should Jor-El teach Clark how to control himself during sexual intercourse as part of his training?
He got me on that one. Look, I thought that was a absurd but fun explanation on Smallville. Smallville specifically had made such a big deal about that. I feel like, I guess they kind of had to address it, and then they dressed it in a fun one-off way, and I don't want to think about what that entails, but that's for Smallville, that was perfect for that show, honestly. As much as we laugh about it, I think that was a perfect way. Beyond that, I don't want to put too much thought in that, Anthony.
I'm with you. The fact that they made that a thing in the first place on Smallville always kind of bugged me. Obviously, it had its roots in the movies that they took so many of their cues from. I get that. But I never liked that they made it an issue. But to their credit, at least they did address it in that one-off line to Chloe, like you said, when they're at the bed and breakfast. It's like, okay, fine. This is part of his training. Sure. We'll go with that. Okay. This next one, when I wrote that article for 13th Dimension, I made this one of the entries. Dan cut it. He replaced it with something. I think he replaced it with the one about being the sole survivor or not, which was, that was a heavy hitter. 13 is tough to narrow this down to 13. But I felt like this was important to have here about whether or not teenage Clark should be this high school football star or sitting, watching longingly from the stands.
Yeah, watching longingly from the stands for me. I think it's totally unfair for him to be a sports star, and it also undercuts the outsider nature and appeal of the character. Frankly, I mean, Superman. He needs to. I think Clark becoming Superman needs to be the first time he can be his true self to the world, right? Where he can finally feel like I'm out there, I'm doing all I can. Is a bird not showing off when it flies? That's right. That sort of stuff, right? I don't mind it. But here's the loophole. I don't mind him trying it out very briefly, like Smallville, right? And then come around to Jonathan's thinking. You're here for a reason, and it's not to score touchdowns. It's not for winning football games, right? As Jonathan Kent tells him on Smallville and Superman the movie, they both hit on those things, and that is the influence I was talking about earlier that Alan Miles took from Superman the movie, right? That Jonathan Kent has that same attitude about it. And look, Smallville seasons 1 to 3, what I'm describing, right? I mean, I've never seen what's to be gained from him being a sports star in high school. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, not to be a broken record about this, but I feel like if you go the Kenny Braverman conduit route, where he's insanely jealous of Clark, and now we get a villain out of it, okay, maybe then there's something. But otherwise, yeah, I agree. I think it's dramatically richer if it's something that he can't have. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that teenage Clark or adult Clark needs to be tripping all over himself. We'll get to that later too. Because in my heart of hearts, I do gravitate towards a generally capable, confident Clark. You know how much I love the George Reeves iteration. That guy won't put up with anything. He's not that guy's not getting pushed around.
No.
So I think there's a line here, and I'm not saying, if he doesn't play football, then he's just got to be falling all over himself. No. But I think you want to have that missed opportunity. You want to have that longing. And to your point, and we go back to the Hothead episode, the one of the very early episodes of Smallville. You get that. He has this moment. He gets a taste of it. but then realizes it's not for him. Now, in the context of Smallville itself, I'm okay with that run that he has at the beginning of season 4. If not for any other reason, then the show got fairly dark once we got past season 4. And so I kind of look back, and in the context of the whole series, it's like, all right, we get this fun, bright spot along the way. But otherwise, yeah, I think what we get earlier on, he tries it, realizes he can't, and that's that.
Well, also his motivations on Smallville, like he has a lot of motivations. He doesn't want to be put in the cornfield like the Scarecrow, which he does anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But specifically, like Lana's a cheerleader. Oh, I know I can be close to this girl I like. I'm going to join this football team. Like, you can relate to that, right? It's like he doesn't even care about like the sport at that point. He just want to be around this girl, right? So that's an understandable motivation. So anyway, I think Smallville. Look, we were hard on Smallville at the beginning, but we're giving it its flowers now. It threaded that needle pretty well, I think.
Absolutely, yes, I agree with you. All right, I think I maybe have my answer based on what you said previously, but this is one of the big ones here about whether or not teenage Clark should be a costumed Superboy. Now, based on what you said previously, I'm going to assume your answer is no.
My answer is no.
Okay.
Although through current events and reading things, and by current events, I'm talking about current events, not so serious. Through Mark Waid's current run on Action Comics, I've been really enjoying it. Right? And I'm like, he has found a way to do that. But again, that's offshoot, right? That's, I think, the baseline Superman origin. It's a no. Like, it's as much as I've come to enjoy the concept. I'm a no on Superboy. Even in the future with the Legion, I've said many times, like, hey, Jeff Johns threaded the needle. He's in the costume in the future. But even then, like, it's a fun loophole. But we don't need Superboy. No proto costumes either. It gets too cute after a while, right? It works for a character like Batman, who's always evolving the costume. You see him with the ski mask and then trying to glide, and the cape doesn't work right, and that kind of that's a fun evolution. But not Superman. For me, Superman, he gets the costume. Right, he does a save. He's revealed to the world, and he gets his name right. So it's basically Superman the movie is what I'm describing. As far as his debut to the world, I think there's way too many questions if he's Superboy and Smallville and Clark Kent. It's you can only suspend your disbelief for so long, and Superboy really breaks that suspension of disbelief.
Okay, I hear you on that. So it's funny. One of our patrons here, Rick, one of the questions he asked about the podcast generally. What is one position that is the most surprising to you that you have changed opinions on? And I would have to say it's Superboy. So for me, I'm going to plant my flag here.
Good.
I want Superboy. And part of it is in putting together this like ultimate Superman origin. I'm trying to be Morrisonian in my approach, taking a page out of Grant Morrison's book and being as kind of all-inclusive as possible and really looking at Clark's journey from the beginning as just this long, weird story with all of these different avenues and adventures. And I've come around, and a lot of that comes from that pre-crisis reading, but especially what we're seeing in the pages of Action Comics right now, because I think, I've always said, well, him becoming Superman is this threshold, graduation level event. It undermines it if he's Superboy. And yes, I mean, I think I have to accept the fact that at least to some extent it does. This is a little bit of a cheat because for the most part here, like we're not engaging in fan fiction, like we're citing examples of things that we like, right? And I guess what I gravitate towards is what Waid has sort of promised, but we haven't seen yet. He's talked about how he envisions there being some sort of moment or event where Clark stops being Superboy and then goes on that Birthright-esque journey. And then after a period of being quiet and silent and out of the picture, then we have the emergence of Superman. And so I think if we get there and if we really stick the landing, I think something like that can work. And when I look at these current Superboy stories in particular, yeah, you are seeing Clark struggle and mess up in ways that you don't as an adult. And so I feel like, okay, this is actually a new avenue here. And I can't deny the charm of a lot of those older stories in particular, especially the Smallville set ones. I'm with you. I still remain a little bit mixed on the Legion side of things, although I've come around a good bit on that front as well. And I will say, if we are doing Clark as Superboy, let him be full-on public Superboy. I'm not going to play this Jeff Johns business where he's like, he wears his action suit in secret and then he goes to the field. It's like, no, if he's going to be Superboy, he's going to be Superboy. So That's where I land on that.
Well, I mean, your whole Superboy fan journey you did, but they kind of maybe have more appreciation for it too. I mean, I remember my dad's comic book, Superboy exists, and it's like, okay, like we were talking about the people who are mad about retcons.
Yeah.
It's talking about retcons being mad. It's like, what do you mean? I read this comic for 40 years. He was Superboy. You took it away after Post-Crisis. But yeah, I think, and then there was the Superboy, the Lost Years or College Years or what that miniseries was where he like tells Lex like, it's not Superboy anymore or whatever. It's like,
right. Yeah.
That's hey, they addressed the transition at some point. So yeah, I am way more accepting of it now than I would have been. I'm not on quite to your level of like,
fair.
he needs to be Superboy, but like it doesn't like I would have said, what a dumb idea. I'm glad they got rid of that. Like I don't feel that way anymore. I understand his place in the mythology.
Yeah, and look, for people listening who are like, no, it's just too silly. It doesn't make sense. People would know. I get it. I get all. I've said all of that. I've believed all of that. I understand. But now I've come around on Clark as Superboy, so I'm all in on that. And then this is one of the other really, really big ticket items here. Should Lex be part of Clark's adolescence in Smallville? And if so, what happens between them?
You want to go first on this one?
No, you go first on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really, this is a hard one. Like, so like when you sent me these, like I highlighted some questions in blue. I'm like, well, these are easy. And then some questions in red. I'm like, I got to think, about this one. This is a red letter question here. You know, the friend that becomes the enemy is such a mythic thing, right? And I think you have to do it. Like in my preferred version, as the arch nemesis, right? What sets Lex Luthor apart than anybody else? There's so many character traits and all that. We can talk about all that, right? But like the fact that he was his best friend, close friend of any kind, right? Superman is everybody's friend, so it doesn't have to be like his best friend in the world sort of thing. But there should be a connection there. I think specifically, and I don't have like it all mapped out or anything, but there should be, you know, look to Smallville, like an incident where Clark saves his life and they bond over that, and Lex becomes obsessed with him on some level, and jealous of him, much like on. So those are the powerful things, I think. But the obsession about like how did he save my life, and the jealousy of the family unit, those are the things that you really should keep and build off of those. I don't know how long they're friends. I don't know how they have their falling out. Like I don't have a strong preference for that specifically. I think it should be for many things. I don't think it should be specifically about, you know, a girl, for example. Like, you know, Smallville, it had the Lana thing, but there was enough stuff going on around it, you know? So there was their friendship was already deteriorating for many things. Before Lana really was probably the last straw for those guys to be friends, but and then I think, you know, to that point, there should be some, maybe not in-game reconciliation, but at some point they have to team up and they fall back on that friendship of their past. That would be so epic to see, to fight off a bigger threat. So I do love the John Byrne, the Lois and Clark. There's so much to be said. Like he's had his youth and whatever, and then he shows up at the big city and there's this ultimate evil that he hadn't even considered existing before. That's equally appealing, but I have to go with the friend who becomes the enemy, becomes the arch nemesis. There's something just mythic and epic about that.
Yeah. And look, audience, you're hearing from two people who watched Smallville religiously, but still, I think the points are valid. And I agree. Like you're saying, we've seen Lex spun in different ways, and you can have him be an enemy because he sees Superman as an existential threat, or because he's simply jealous, right? At the most basic level. So we don't necessarily need this adolescent background between them, but I feel like it enriches the story for all the reasons that you said. And I think it just makes Lex a more interesting character when our hero and we, the audience, like really see where he comes from. I mean, maybe there's an argument to him being more of an enigma when you don't have all of the backstory. I don't know, but I think there's something to be said for having that here, for the question about whether and to what extent Clark is responsible for who Lex becomes. And when we get to this question of Lex's redemptive capability, it becomes much more of a question, and an interesting one, when you have that backstory. So I think if we can tap into something like the show did, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, that's one of the most important things, is that Lex ends up the way he does for a number of reasons. Yes, Clark keeps a secret. There's also Lana between them. There's the way that he was raised by Lionel. Like, there are so many layers to it, and I think if you can achieve that. Now, here's the problem, and I'm saying I want them to have a past together, but the problem that I run into is that even in these recent comics in particular, you know, I'm thinking from Birthright forward, and then especially Secret Order, you know, we've had different moments along the way where their past in Smallville has been reinstated and confirmed. But I feel like in these modern comics, it's like they don't go far enough.
Right.
Like
right.
every time we see them in Smallville, it's like these fleeting encounters.
Why would I want to be your friend? Right?
And it becomes this thing. It's like, well, so like, why are we doing this then? Like, if they're not actually going to be, if there's not going to be a broken friendship at the heart of this, what's the point?
So wasn't it cool that he saw Lex for 2 minutes? And well, it's like your point about Superboy in the Legion, like in the Superboy costume in Secret.
Right.
What's the point, right? I used to talk about how I've changed. I used to be like, what a brilliant loophole, everybody. We got the Legion here, we got Lex, and I'm like, what? Yeah, what is the point? Because you want the fallout, and if there's no real friendship or foundation, I mean, look, I kind of like Secret Origin as a whole more than Birthright. Just personally, I gravitate towards that, but like. At least with Birthright, they had a longer connection there, like coming over to their house and talking about, the space and all that stuff. And, like that needs to build to some, I don't know what that something is because they haven't figured it out yet in the comics or on Smallville, frankly. Unfortunately, they never really figured that out. They erased his mind. But like, I think that what we both want is there to be that Magneto Professor X relationship between Lex Luthor and Superman, where they both have this history, but they ended up on different sides of this never-ending battle. But they respect each other on some way, and maybe, the reason Superman doesn't he gives Lex, he always gives him, it's a blind spot for him, because they were friends, right? Batman can probably give him crap about, why are you letting this guy do this? Like, well, you don't know Lex like I do, and, that could really warp his, not warp, but, color
blind
his
spot
opinion.
Is perfect, yeah. We have a destiny together, only on different sides. No.
Yeah.
And that's, I know the argument that always comes up is like, well, but then Lex would know the secret and he would destroy Clark's life. It's like, no, I don't. I think it goes both ways. It's like, yeah, maybe Superman gives Lex a little bit more leeway, but I think Lex also allows Clark to have a life because there is still something there. It's like in the Mark Waid version, which we saw in Birthright and then again in Last Days of Lex Luthor, in fairness, yes, there was more interaction between Clark and Lex. My frustration there was that Lex was just such a dick all the time. Like every interaction they had ended with him getting mad and storming off. And I'm like, what? Like you go back to the early seasons of Smallville. He's the nicest guy in town. Like you love this guy. So I feel like there's an inherent limitation there. And then in the Jeff Johns Secret Origin, it's just like these fleeting encounters. So I think if we're going to do it, you got to really do it. And then it's like, well, you have to carry that through. And I feel like this too is where we keep hitting walls. Like I've cited constantly that scene between Clark and Lex from the series finale of Smallville. That's the dynamic. Like that's what you could, but then they erase his memory. More recently in Action 1050 when Lex, because this is the point where Clark has revealed his identity of the world, and then Lex erases everyone's memories, right? But Lex retains the knowledge himself.
I love that. Yeah.
And there's that scene between them when they're fighting in space, and Lex is like, why didn't you tell me? Like I was so lonely. Like you could have saved. Like why didn't you? And I'm like, this is great. But and it's not like I need them referencing their past together all the time. But sometimes, like, could they maybe one time, I don't know, joke about some weird teacher or farmer?
What do we always joke about?
Exactly. So there's more to do there. But yeah, I like that broken friendship between them.
Yep.
Oh man. I mean, arguably, this next one is quite a big one as well. But I don't know. I feel like this is, well, for me, this is an easy answer. Should one or both of the Kents die before Clark leaves Smallville? And if so, how and why? I mean, look, this has come up so many times. I get the value in having Jonathan in particular die, and that signifies the end of his childhood, the end of his time in Smallville. That's the moment that now he's going to embrace his larger destiny. I get that. And those moments when we have seen them, they are resonant. But for me, no, I like having them on the board. I like them being that home base for him. And whenever we do see that manifest, I feel like we get more than we would. I feel like if you kill one or both of them, you get the power of that moment. But then that's kind of it. Whereas if they remain there, then it opens up storytelling avenues moving forward.
Yeah, I would much rather him go home and talk to his adoptive parents about anything than go fly up to the fortress and talk to his computer AI alien dad about anything, right? I mean, there's just something. If the never-ending battle to make Superman more relatable, right? Like, well, that's why you like. There you go, right there. So, and look, I understand specifically in the movies because we've had 3 Superman franchises now on the big screen. 2 of them have killed off Jonathan Kent as a rite of passage, as a point of where he moves on to another phase of his life, and I understand why. They did that in a movie, The Hero's Journey and all that. But if for an ongoing story, look at the value of Lois and Clark having his parents to talk to his dad about some things he can understand, talk about other things with his mom that she can more relate to him on, that sort of thing. Superman the animated series the same way. So, yeah, there's a lot you can do with them. And, eventually they will get old and pass away and maybe, address that at that point. Superman and Lois did that when Martha died. I was like, at first, like, why'd you kill Martha, too? Jonathan was already dead. But they unpacked her importance to the town over time and all that. So I came to understand why they did that. So, no, I say they should. There's no reason just to default kill them off. It's such a played out trope at this point, not just for Superman, but in any hero's journey. Oh, we got to kill the parents, right? Or kill the dad or kill the mom. We don't need to.
Yeah, it's like keeping them on the board. It's like they remain this grounding, humanizing presence. You can also utilize them in different ways. I mean, we've seen versions even just in these recent decades where they care for Connor or Kara is there or what have you. So it's like you can use them in different ways. Or John can, I think, in the current comics. So like they can continue to serve different functions along the way. But the other thing too is that it's like you look at something like Superman the movie, and yes, it's such a powerful moment when he realizes, like, for all these things I can do, I couldn't save him. That is a critical lesson, but I feel like he can learn that in other ways. And he's not Batman. He's not Spider-Man. Like, he's not driven by this loss of his father. So yeah,
on Smallville, he is Spider-Man as Spider-Man via Superman. But hey, Alan Miles wrote Spider-Man 2, one of the greatest superhero films of all time. So the connections there of he's a trauma-informed hero. But then in season 10, they kind of correct that as well over the time. So like that should not be his driving force. You're so right about that.
Absolutely. Okay, and then our final Smallville question here pertains to one Lana Lang. Maybe, I didn't include any Pete Ross question. That might undermine my whole Justice for Pete Ross campaign. Pete should be there. Pete should be there. And he should know the secret. He should be the guarder of the secret, all that stuff. Okay.
I've got your back.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, and this is something because we're going to have a lot more to say about Lana in an upcoming episode. We're going to give her the treatment we've done with other characters, looking at her across time and media. But I've been kicking around this idea of the way their relationship has been depicted in various iterations, where it's like you look at the pre-crisis comics and she was his girlfriend, like 2 words, right? And she was kind of the annoying girl next door, always trying to figure out his identity. Then we get to post-crisis territory, and clearly she has a different level of feeling for Clark than he does for her. It's often said he sees her more as a sister, so then we're in like quasi-sibling territory. I feel like, New 52, there was a romantic component, but they played there more as like best friends sort of thing. And then, of course, you look at something like Smallville, where they are great loves of each other's lives. Maybe not the great love, but great loves who are only not together because they physically can't be in the end. Yeah. So what level of relationship do you like to see between them?
I was not as well versed in the comics back in 2001 when Smallville came out as I am today. So I didn't really have a idea of exactly who Lana Lang should be. I'm like, oh yeah, it's his girlfriend from Smallville when he was a teenager, right? I mean, that's the extent of my knowledge. And as I, got older and read more stuff and learned more about comic book characters, I was like, oh, they did basically make Lana Lang Chloe Sullivan on Smallville. I mean, in a way. And that, I guess, would count as, best friends with unrequited love. And that's probably the best way to use the character, at least at that stage. And then honestly, I think I don't think strong preferences about Lana because she's so different. Like every version is so different. But ultimately, I think she needs to be the girl that he left behind. But maybe she's resentful about that for a few years. But then she finds her place in Smallville, and I think Superman and Lois did a great job with that character in the big picture. And that's the kind of blueprint I would use. Like she starts a family, she loves her husband and her kids, she becomes a mayor. Like she has a fully fulfilled life. I understand why that she would never get over Superman, right? But I don't want her to go marry Pete Ross as like a settling for him because that didn't end well for them, did it? So that's what I would go the Superman and Lois kind of blueprint when she's older, and then I guess the Chloe Sullivan blueprint when she's younger.
All right, I'm with you on the Superman and Lois. I think that's probably, in my view, kind of like the best version of the character. Like I like for there to have been a romantic relationship between the two of them.
Okay.
I mean, a bit beyond, I don't know, like what's the sweet spot? A bit beyond high school sweethearts, they went to the prom together versus they're living together on the farm and then she gets kryptonite poisoning and she leaves.
There's a middle ground to be had there. Well, I mean, even in post-crisis, Anthony, right? I mean, she thought Clark was going to propose.
Yeah.
When he told her he was an alien, but were they like even dating? Like,
no, that's the thing. I mean, when you get to something like For All Seasons, they flesh it out a little bit more, and they did go to the prom together, so it's like, okay. But yeah, when you look at Man of Steel itself,
that's what they do there.
Everyone said they were going to end up together, so that's that's why she thought. Yeah. So yeah, I like there to be. I mean, I guess ultimately, I like for them to be each other's first love, but then to part. And I guess as far as her being the one he leaves behind, I'm okay with that. But yeah, not to the point where it leads to ongoing resentment, right? Like I want her to be able to move on with her life. And again, I think Superman and Lois probably is the right balance for me because, and I think about this a lot. I brought this up in other episodes where early on in Superman and Lois, especially when Lana and Lois, like they go out drinking or whatever, which is great. Yeah. And like Lana has some line about like, oh yeah, like we briefly dated. She plays it off. Right. Yeah. But then, and there was more they could have done here. I feel like this was a bit of a missed opportunity because then when Clark reveals his identity to her later, like one of the first things she asks is like, did you even love me? Right. And in one of those flashbacks, we see
like,
her.
I love you. Yeah. Yeah.
So I look at that show and here's the thing. This is why I say it was a good balance because I truly don't think Lana throughout that show was harboring these lingering feelings or anything like that or was resentful. But it was just so interesting the way she characterized their relationship. Oh yeah, we dated. But then there are these moments where it's like, no, I think there was actually a little something more there. So that was so intriguing to me. And that's kind of where I like it to be. I mean, we had a comment from Josh, one of our patrons and guests, who says with respect to Lana, he really gravitated towards the Greg Pak and Aaron Kuder run in Action Comics. And I think that's where it was more of like a best friend type energy. So I'm not opposed to that, but I do kind of like the idea of they're each other's first love, but not necessarily to the, not as fraught and angsty as we get in Smallville.
Right. Well, I mean, you got to remember, everybody, when I make the Chloe Sullivan analogy, I was a really big Clark Kent, Chloe Sullivan shipper back in the day on Smallville.
Yeah.
I guess they had that, she knew his secret and they were a team. I mean, I would have liked more of that energy from a Clark Kent, Lana Lang, and then through the course of living their life, they realize they're not meant to be together, and they kind of drift apart, and just use that to explore that phase of life, but to go in their separate ways. So, that's where I am on it.
My last thing, I guess I like it to be reciprocal. I don't like the Byrne version where she thinks she's getting a proposal and he kisses her on the head. It's like, no, like what are we doing here? So whether they're buddies or loves, whatever it is, I like it to be reciprocal. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics, many of them starring the Man of Steel, Logan's favorite character. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram @SingleBoundPodcast. Step into the refraction with Drunken Avenger #1, The Volunteer, an indie comic by Rick Reason that turns the tropes upside down. 4 men died in 9 seconds. John Stevens survived, but survival has a price. Now, the government calls him a variable. The media calls him the Drunken Avenger, and the city of Meridian is caught in the crossfire between civil liberty and national security. Follow @Drunken Avenger on social media for project updates and previews. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? That's exactly what Robbo is doing on This Podcast Will Never Die, which starts with all the ways the Man of Steel stood out on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. All right. Our last category here, the Metropolis portion of the story here. So we were getting at this before, but in terms of where the costume comes from, who makes it, right? Is it a Martha Kent original? Is it made by Martha, but inspired by Kryptonian garb like we see in Birthright? Is it simply bestowed by Jor-El like we see in Superman the movie and Man of Steel, or a joint effort? And I'm thinking about My Adventures with Superman, where Clark gets the costume from Jor-El and then Martha adds the trunks.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was cute, the combination of the two. I mean, I don't really have a strong preference. I mean, my mom made it for me line is classic. It's been used in so many versions now. Lois and Clark perhaps did it first.
Yes, yes, I'm almost positive Lois and Clark did it first, and they did it twice. It's in the pilot, and then it's in that first Tempest episode.
Yeah, because he's a little girl at the space station.
Yeah, because he's making fun of yes, and then in the Tempest episode, Tempest is making fun of him, and then he just leans in. My mother made it for me,
right?
And then we got it in For All Seasons, and we got it in Superman and Lois.
Yeah. It's a great line. It really is. Although if I had to choose, I would choose Jor-El giving it to him as a uniform for their culture, right? Why else would he wear this? This is his connection to his culture. You know, like we've been talking about. I think we're both on the same page of like, I don't want too much Krypton stuff all the time. This is the time to have the Krypton, the representation, right? The crest, right? Being from the planet, right? That sort of thing. We'll talk about that. But there's just something appropriate for him to get it from Jor-El. I find that as an appropriate rite of passage. Which I guess does that contradict I want him to do Superman stuff before he knows who he is. So maybe, these all don't have to be in alignment with each other, these answers. Like, I don't think you can have a Superboy Anthony and have Lex Luthor be his friend. For example, I don't think those work together. They're mutually exclusive. But I see the value in either one. Either one, I'm like, oh, that's not. I feel the same way kind of equally about either version. I'm not going to put my flag in the sand for either one, really.
Okay. Yeah.
So now you have to choose.
I would honestly hate to lose My Mother Made It For Me.
Right?
That's such a great moment. At the same time, when we've had versions of the story where they've seen nothing of Krypton and she still comes up with this costume, it's like, well, I mean, and look, there are so many different ways you can spin this. I mean, even right now in the Action Comics pages, you have Jonathan Kent, who's like this history buff. He knows everything about the Justice Society. He's quizzing Clark about the JSA character. So it's like you can fill in like, oh, they're drawing inspiration from these old mystery men or circus strongmen or whatever it is. But I think for me, maybe Birthright is the answer, where she has seen imagery of Kryptonians. So she's making it, but it's inspired by what she's seeing. I think something like that works.
Secret Origin's the same, isn't it? She sees something from the projection, like the same exact beat of Martha being like, okay. But you're right. Man of Steel, where Jonathan and Clark like go into the other room and say, hey, we came up with this S. I was like, no. That has to be like we'll get into it again. Like, I don't care what it represents specifically, but it needs to be from Krypton. It's tough, man. Like, flip a coin for me. Like, I don't know. But I think, look, if I had to choose, if you make me choose, I think I'll choose Jor-El giving him the costume.
There is something, like we keep saying, mythic, biblical about just being bestowed with that. And also it's like, if it's a costume like the design and quality of the Man of Steel one, it's like, well, how the hell would Martha make that? So
I still don't know if Martha made the one in, like, did she hire someone to make that one in Smallville?
In the gun movie? I don't know.
Well, the gun movie, I don't even know about that, but I'm just Smallville. Like, you made the Superman Returns costume, Martha.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, I guess I'm cool with it being bestowed, but I do quite like the moment of My Mother Made It For Me. And I think as long as she's taking inspiration from imagery she's seen, I think it works. And I think that's a good, I mean, look, like that montage in the Lois and Clark pilot when they're going through, like, it's fun. I mean, I can't deny that, but that wouldn't be my ultimate version.
Well, the last thing I'll say about it is, again, Superman's costume, I think he has one costume and it never changes unless he dies or something, right? Okay, but with Batman, it's always changing. So, like, sure, Alfred made it for me, my butler made it for me, right? But for Superman, like, this is the costume he came with him in the ship or somewhere else, and that's what he wears, or the Fortress threaded it for him and he wears it, and that's why it never changes. It's constant, much like him. So.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, a related question, our next one, number 16, as we're getting to the end game here. It's not an S, or is it? Right? Like, what, if anything, do you like the S to signify? Like, is it an S for super? Although it gets real tough here, because in certain iterations, going back to the very beginning, it's like he's got an S on his chest before he's been named Superman. So was he just assuming that he will? Like, what's going on here? And then obviously we've had it as the family crest, right, with the Superman the movie and subsequent iterations. We've had this business about it signifying hope. Wade played around with this idea of it being a flag of Krypton. It was a family crest and a flag of Krypton. Like, we've had all of these different spins on it. What's your preferred version?
Well, it's not an S. I agree with that. I don't think it necessarily has to stand for anything specifically either. Let's not overcomplicate it, right? It's the crest of the House of L. Every house has their own on Krypton, right? So Superman the movie style or Supergirl style, which is like it's the symbol of the House of L. Perfect, done.
Right.
Fine. That's all you need. I don't need to know that it represents X, Y, or Z or whatever. You can talk about how like we believe in this house that everyone has the hope and goodness and right. Great, that's your philosophy, but it doesn't have to like be part of the symbol itself. That's where I stand on it. But it's certainly not an S.
Yeah, I definitely don't like it to just be an S. I think ultimately, yeah, family crest, good. But I don't know, I do like it actually having this meaning of hope. I don't need it to be the flag, though. That was a bit too far for me. That's fine. But yeah, I like it being the family crest and that it has this added significance of meaning hope. Now, you look at something like Absolute Superman, I'll reference that again, where it's the symbol of that guild of the laborers on Krypton. So that's yet another version. But I do like it being specific to the family, to the House of L. So yeah, that's what I gravitate towards. All right.
Because if he's like flying around in space, I want people to like say, oh, you're Kryptonian or you're from the House of L. Like that's interesting. Like I think that's happened. I feel like that's happened. I feel like I've read that somewhere. People identify him as Kryptonian. I mean, going back to the costume too, through the shield. Like that's a whole nother, like, oh, you knew my father or whatever, right? There's so many story possibilities that can come out of that as well.
Absolutely. This next one I think will be quick. Is journalism a passion or a convenience for Clark? Because obviously the traditional iteration of this is like he takes a job so that he can find out about disasters as they're happening. What do you gravitate more towards?
Well, Superman obviously was invented before the internet age. So, but no, I think it should be an interest that kind of dovetails into a convenience, but then he does it more. The more he does it, it becomes more of a passion for him, right? Like he does it like, oh, well, this is, I can learn about disaster as they happen on the newswire. But then he realizes, oh, I can create change as Clark Kent just as much as Superman, right? It's a different, he can get wins that way through journalism, through truth seeking than in other ways than he does is like, changing the course of mighty rivers, right? And all that sort of thing, right? So I think there's power in that. And the fact that like he shouldn't, I don't know, I don't think he needs to be like, and I'm so excited to go work for a newspaper. But he should realize the advantages of it the more he does it. And I think that's the way in through that, in my opinion.
Okay, fair enough. I think for me, I like it really to be a core passion that he has and to sort of recognize that he can affect change this way too. And the fact that he's in the middle of the action is a side benefit. But yeah, and I think stories where you actually get to see his prowess as a reporter. I mean, I think of like the Up and Away arc during 1 year later, right after Infinite Crisis, where he's been powerless. He's been writing all these exposés and taking down Intergang and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I like the idea that he's actually accomplishing something as a reporter, and it's something that he cares about. So yeah, it simply being a cover or a convenience, I think that only gets us so far.
Well, I think starting like that, and then he discovers it as he goes, is maybe an interesting arc for him, at least, Because I feel like on Smallville, God bless Smallville, but like, even like season 2, he's like, I'm probably going to be in college studying journalism. Like, why? Why? Because you write the lunch menu at school? Like, we never saw the journey of him to be like, did he even like being a journalist on Smallville? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't. They never really explore that at all. Like, even, as much as they fumbled around with Lois's character for years on Smallville, when they got to like season 7, 8, like she like was a reporter and it was in her blood and she enjoyed it and she saw the good she could do of it. I guess I want to see that self-realization journey for him. I want to end up at the same place as you. But no, that's where I am coming from.
That's fair. And I think a part of the story, should be showing how he first gains and cultivates this interest in journalism, however it might manifest. I mean, like in Birthright, when he's traveling the world and he's writing stories and he's getting involved with all of these people along the way, that's something. I mean, obviously we're kind of dropped into the middle of the action there, but still, like, I think something like that helps account for it. But I always cite that the pilot of Lois and Clark, where he writes like beautiful human interest story about that woman at the theater that's about to close. I like that too, where I do also like when he's taking down Intergang, or my God, you go to the George Reeves series, like he's always writing these stories about the mobsters and whatnot. But I do also like the idea And I guess you see this at the end of the Gunn movie too, of him telling a different kind of story than Lois would necessarily. But no, I don't disagree with you. I think showing at least like where this starts, and maybe your answer is the right one, where it's like it starts as his convenience and then the passion grows. But ultimately, yes, we want it to be something that means something to him.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is Clark Kent the main identity where he's confident, capable, and assertive, or this meek cover? All right, because we've talked about this so much over the years about whether Superman is the true identity, Clark is merely this disguise, or like we saw in the post-crisis era, like Clark is who I am, Superman is what I can do. Where do you land?
It's tough. When you come to these characters as children, you kind of lean into the power fantasy of it all, of like, everybody thinks I'm just some goofy Clark Kent, but I'm really Superman, right? And that's a huge appeal. As you get older, you're like, well, wait a minute, like he is a two-dimensional facade of a character. You want some more depth there. I mean, obviously the eras of, up until the post-crisis version, Superman was the guy.
Yep.
I other than like, I guess the George Reeves show where it seemed like it was this oddity, ironically, a pre-crisis show from the 50s, they based the character off of for the 80s reboot where he's the real character. But even then he was kind of the facade. I don't know. But this is tough, man. Because I love Christopher Reeve's Clark Kent. I love George Reeves' Clark Kent, and I spent 10 years with Tom Welling's Clark Kent. I don't know what to think because Tom Welling was going like the post-crisis route for so long, and then in season 10, he's like, I've always been the Blur. I'm like, what? No, what? He morphed into Christopher Reeve's Superman at the end. And I was like, well, I don't know if I need that or like that. It's like the secret identity is huge here. Right? Because is he trying to throw people off? Right? Is he trying to, make people not think this guy would be Superman? And if that's the case, then it's like, well, I mean, he does put on this air about, oh, hello, Mr. White. Oh my goodness, right? I don't know. I think, I think the perfect balance is like the Clark Kent's the real guy, but he puts on this goofy act when he's like at work and stuff, and he's his real self on the farm with the Kents, right? And then when he's Superman, he's also putting on a bit of an act. I like the idea that he puts on a bit of an act when he's Superman as well. Like
yes.
Tyler Hoechlin did that.
Yes.
Right? Because he was like a goofy, excitable guy at home with his family. And so they're different shades. I think it's, not to get all like, to get all undercut the question here and try to get out of answering, but I think it's more complicated than just A or B. I think there's other facets to the character, and it's maybe more interesting that way.
No, I'm with you. And I've long said, and Clark on the Farm is the truest version. And there is an element of disguise in both Clark the Reporter and Superman. I do think that's the case. I definitely don't gravitate towards Clark being a meek cover because I do think it ultimately proves limiting if you're trying to tell more involved stories of him at the Daily Planet as a reporter. Like, I feel like there's just a built-in limitation if it is just a cover. You cite Tyler Hoechlin, and just like we cited their take on Lana. Similarly, I was really thinking about this. I think the Superman and Lois approach to the identity might be my favorite, or at least way, way up there. Because, and actually, you're also seeing this in My Adventures with Superman, where it's like that Clark is kind of a dork. Like he is very excitable and all of that, and I think maybe leans into it a little bit more in The Office and puts on more of an air of confidence as Superman. So you still have that element of disguise, but at the end of the day, yeah, there's a little bit of that dorky, excitable energy to him, which I think is great. So, and I think, I mean, obviously we didn't get to see a ton of Clark at the Daily Planet in Superman and Lois because we were past that point, but the little bits that we did see, or, once again, go back to Birthright, I think those showed him more as just mild-mannered, maybe fading into the background a little bit, like being more forgettable as opposed to drawing attention to himself for being clumsy or what have you. Well,
the Brandon Routh Clark Kent from Superman Returns, like it's like this calibrated, like modern take on the Christopher Reeve version. But I will say, Justice for Superman 4, I think of all the Christopher Reeve movies, he seemed like a well-rounded but person as Clark Kent and Superman 4. Like he's, we're going to do this and that, talking to people like a little more assertive, So it's just so, Anthony, it's just so entertaining to see him be this goofy guy but then to see him like be a badass at the same time. Right. I mean, like unexpectedly so.
Right.
So that's what I grabbed because it's again, that secret identity appeal. Right. It's tough, but you know what? We would be remiss if we didn't quote maybe the best line on Lois and Clark, right? Clark Kent is who I am. Superman is what I can do. And that probably is the proper blueprint for the character, right?
Yeah, and going back to Superman and Lois, I mean, hand in hand with this, I love the take there that Lois is smitten with Clark and is very skeptical of Superman. Like, I love that flip on the typical dynamic. And so, yeah, I think giving Clark, I think, like with so much of this, there's a balance to be struck. And I think we can make Clark like a little goofy, mild-mannered, a little forgettable, but not to the point where we're undermining the integrity of the character. Like, we want him to be like a believable love interest for Lois. Like, we want to believe like he can be this crusading reporter, or at least I like to see that from the character. So I think there's a line there. But yeah, I think Superman and Lois really, I was very pleased with the way that played out there.
I have more to say on that in our next question, Anthony. So yes, me too.
Oh yeah, this pertains more to Lois about kind of when she's let in on this, because we've seen instances, Smallville and Man of Steel, the film in particular, where she's part of the origin story. Like there's no point where she thinks Clark and Superman are two different people, but obviously historically that we play this triangle and she doesn't know. So yeah, at what point should Lois be let in on this?
So, like, bouncing off what you said about Superman and Lois and Clark and their relationship, like, it might be recency bias, but my new favorite take on their early relationship is Superman and Lois, and in the flashback episode of season 1, which is, I think we all agree, is probably the best episode of that show. It's an incredible hour of television and Superman mythology, right? Like, Lois thinks Superman is a distraction from real news at first, right? She's a skeptic, right? She's also dating Clark and loves him, and like that's like she's like, oh well, you know, he's goofy, but I love him. Like that is so adorable, right? But it still maintains this secret identity. Like she doesn't know they're different people. But you know, I would add more of a wrinkle of maybe her starting to suspect that he's Superman, and then like, you know, do some of this. You know, you can have some like a few instances of doppelgangers and power losses that kind of throw her off for a while, because I that's the thing. We've drifted so far away from secret identities across all superhero multimedia. I want to bring it back. I understand that we don't want to like be lying to people and gaslighting people anymore, and maybe that's why people find it problematic, but it's part of the DNA of these characters. So I think just for a little bit, like maybe a year or two, right? Like maybe she doesn't know, right? Just a little bit off the top. And then at some point, you know, she starts like testing them, you know, like jumping into Niagara Falls or something, for example. But I think ultimately, I think it's important for it to be a combination of her figuring it out and then him telling her. Like, I don't want to, hey, I got you, right? I mean, that's what they tried to do in the Silver Age so many times. But also, I just don't someone to be like, look, Clark Kent, Superman. Like, that's not interesting. Like, there has to be some, like, you have to build towards it together at the same time. I don't want, for example, him telling her his secret as he proposes, for example. It's just a lot to take in at the same time. So that's where I am with Lois. And I don't think that she should know beforehand. As fun as it was in Smallville, it's the nature of that show. And Man of Steel was an interesting approach where she helped kind of before he was even Superman. But I think him meeting her at the Daily Planet for the first time and taking it from there is the way to go. And then all that other stuff I said before.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel like Smallville and Man of Steel, that worked in those specific contexts. And, you know, Man of Steel, the fact that she believed in him, right, was crucial. And I think that's a great moment. But yeah, generally, I agree. I think you want to play that secret for a little while.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to push it. We don't want to push it too far. It yet always bothered me in the Triangle era comics that they're already engaged and then he goes to tell her. It's like, if we just flip the order, and I think that's probably the sweet spot. It's like because you understand why he wouldn't tell her from the jump.
Yeah.
Right. So it would make sense that he would want to see that it's serious, that it's real, that she loves him for who he really is, especially if we're really in the mode of him not merely putting on an act as Clark. But then, yeah, and I agree with you. It's like you want him to tell her, but you want her to have already figured it out or be pretty much all the way there. It's like the end of season 2 of Lois and Clark. Instead of Clark about to propose or proposing, instead of that, if it had been like he was ready to tell her the secret and then we get the who's saying it, Clark or Superman, like that, I think would have been kind of an ideal version for me. So,
but that's a great template too, because the show's 2 years in.
Yep.
She didn't know for 2 years. Now she knows to move on to another phase, because it is unsustainable for it to go on forever. If you're telling I mean, I know comics is a forever medium, but you know, you can only suspend your disbelief for so long, and you can figure out ways to, like I said, doppelgangers, power losses. Smallville did that stuff all the time to throw people off the scent. So give her respect her enough that she's not like, you know, like you don't to another
right. Yeah.
Clark again, right? But I think we're on the same page there about that for sure.
Yeah. And it's funny with the whole gaslighting idea. Yeah. I think the longer this goes on, the deeper into a relationship they are. If he hasn't told her, then I feel like we're running. I mean, if they're intimate with each other and he still hasn't shared this, it's like, which I didn't put this on the list, but I guess here's another question. I don't want to make it seem like I have a one-track mind here, but it's now come up twice on Lois and Clark and Superman and Lois, this idea that he's a virgin until Lois.
I thought that was pretty cute, especially in Superman and Lois, where I forget the exact conversation around it, but she's like, "You're about to have a new best favorite day of your life." I thought that was hilarious. I remember that line. That is appropriately old fashioned for a character like him. I don't think it's necessarily you have to do that, but it's I kind of like that. If they don't get all high and mighty about it, I guess that's maybe, I know people have a problem with that perhaps, but I think, for a Midwestern guy who's just doing the right thing, and then also you add that with his fear about he being an alien and not knowing what's going to happen, that makes sense. So
Sure. I don't know. I feel like let this guy get laid previously. Is kind of, I do also, going back to Lana, like I do like that idea of them being each other's first in that sense. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, as far as Lois.
What do you think about her being skeptical of Superman now, instead of like being the one person who's totally in love with him and has his blinders or everything else? Like, I think that's a modern reinvention that's pretty appropriate for a character like her.
Oh man, 1,000%. It's like, look, we've seen it enough times where she's just infatuated with Superman and can barely even pay attention to Clark. It's like, no, I really, really liked that inversion. And I think it's, like it makes her a more interesting character, because for the average person, who would capture your interest? Yeah, probably the guy flying around, but Lois isn't everybody else. Right. Lois is more taken with this kind of nerdy but good guy right next to her. So yeah, no, I absolutely love that as well.
It somehow took the spirit of what that relationship should be, and it changed the specifics. But even though it was all different than what we're used to, the triangle from before, the spirit of it was still there, and that's the key. Yes.
All right. Number 20, our last question here, pertains to how Clark should make his public debut. And I feel like this too, we've seen a lot of commonality across comics, film, television, where in most instances there's some aerial save, right? Whether it's the space shuttle or the helicopter, there's some sort of aerial component.
Literally in my notes here, I have an aerial rescue.
And I think that's what it should be.
Yeah.
Like that, I feel like that's befitting of the debut of this character, and would kind of have the kind of momentous nature of something like that.
Yeah. But maybe the first time he flies, maybe. I think that's a huge missed opportunity from Smallville, for example, right? They're building up for years. He has mental block, right? Then the 200th episode, a beautiful moment. He's having a moment with Lois. He starts floating kind of subconsciously. He had subconsciously floated, whatever, a few times over the years, right? But if like Lois being the one in danger unlocks his ability to fly, right? That would be a great thing there, right? But I love the small scale, if you want to call that, helicopter rescue of Superman the movie. But then going big, like with a space plane, Superman Returns works too. I mean, that was a return moment, but it could have been so easily tweaked into a debut. In fact, I think it actually was when they were making Superman Flyby. I think that was the deal. Like they liked that sequence so much they kept it for the next project, for example. So you just need a big public positive win, right? Like you have your doubters like Lex and the government and maybe that version of Lois we're talking about. Not that she's a doubter, but she's like, come on, this is like, we got real news here. We're talking about this flying guy for. We got, he's a distraction, right? Maybe that's her take on it. But the public should love him at first, and then Lex and the government could perhaps seed seeds of, questioning and skepticism and stuff. But I think a big public win where everybody falls in love with him. And that wouldn't last. The honeymoon phase wouldn't last forever, right? There's interest there with the world. Must there be a Superman? There's a lot of good stuff there you play with. But I think people should like we've been talking about, this guy would be the biggest celebrity in the world immediately if this happened, and they should explore that, run with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think an aerial save, regardless of how big or small scale we get, but I think something like that just kind of captures the grandeur of that kind of debut. So
Yeah, because for all his powers, right? What do people say? Oh, he flies.
Right.
That's
exactly.
the first one people think of, and that's the one. Batman can't save a helicopter. I guess he probably could with a gadget, but he can save a helicopter falling out of the sky. Superman
right.
can.
That's the thing. It's like one thing if he puts out a fire, well, we have firemen, right? It's one thing he stops a bank robbery, well, we have cops. But if a plane is falling out of the sky, that's it. But for him. So I think that's the right approach here. A couple of quick patron questions here to carry us out, but related to this. So James asks, do you both have a preferred era for the Earth part of the origin to be set? For example, Superman revealing himself in 1970s Metropolis versus 2020s. Thank you so much for the wonderful and high quality podcast and for broadening my Krypton palette beyond the films, up and away to episode 300. So I appreciate that. Yeah, but as far as era, I mean, I think we're talking about this, we're assuming like, set present day, but yeah, if you had your way, would you set it in a different time period?
Man, I hadn't really thought about it that way. I mean, I think baseline it should always be modern day where you are, because those are the stories we're telling, right? Mm-hmm. Although I do love a good period piece, and I've always said I think having a proper full Superman and Batman adventure movie, miniseries, whatever, take place in the era they were created, a lot of potential there to do some cool stuff. So I mean, I'm fine with it being whenever the current year is, but if you want to have some fun with it, set it in 1938.
Yeah, I mean, like something like that. Look, if I can only have one version, no, just set present day whenever that is. But yeah, if we can really play around a little bit, I think, having it be a period piece, leaning into that golden age version of the character, more modestly powered, champion of the oppressed. I would love to. I mean, like that would be great to see, whether animated or live action. So, or just in comics to see it spun like that.
I have yet to read the book It's Superman, although I've had it on my shelf for years. I know that's set in that time period.
I tried. We did a Patreon thing about it, and I struggled mightily. But my guest Tim Bruns, he loved it. So okay. I feel like I'm in the minority on this. I'll give it another stab at some point. And then last one from Brian Dempsey once again. He says, when Superman reveals himself to the world, do you prefer he be the first hero inspiring others, the first in a new silver age of heroes, or one of dozens of costumed heroes?
Ooh. I mean, baseline Superman origin, he should be the first one that everybody aspires to be and follows his example. I understand the decades of DC mythology and how they're always trying to loop. Well, World War II, we had and Smallville even with like, oh yeah, they were in secret, but we had this JSA, and it's like I understand why they're doing that to kind of celebrate the DC is a legacy. They have legacy heroes. It's part of the DNA that separates them from Marvel. Marvel's not the same that way. DC has that, but if I'm building a universe from scratch, Superman is the first guy, and the only guy maybe for a little bit. That people look up to, and he sets the example.
I'm too big of a Justice Society fan to discard them. So yeah,
put them on Earth too, Anthony. Don't worry about it.
No, I'm cool with the idea of there having been a Justice Society, and the fact that they were these mystery men from a bygone era, and then they disappeared, and enough time has passed. They're not necessarily in the public consciousness. And there was, I mean, I guess arguably if we're talking about the Spectre or Dr. Fate or Green Lantern, that kind of undermines what I'm about to say, but still no one to the nature or extent of a Superman, so that Superman can still kind of stand apart. But I do like that idea of them having existed. I do like the idea, like I was saying before, that Jonathan Kent is a JSA history buff, and that this is some measure of inspiration for Clark. But when he makes that debut, I would want it to have been that the JSA has been off the board for decades, and Clark is the first of this wave of heroes, and then the others follow. I do think that is important.
A silver age of heroism.
Yeah. You will lead.
There's just something about, like, in Batman Hush, it's like seeing young Bruce Wayne and Tommy Elliott watch Alan Scott flying around Gotham City. I'm like, it just feels weird to me. But I mean, to your point, I mean, about Superboy as well, like, as long as there's some kind of gap, some separation where he doesn't show up and he's like yet another hero of a stable of heroes already exist. There's been a drought for a while, and he brings it back. So that's a loophole that I could get with.
Yeah. So. Like I said, I'm trying to be Morrisonian. I think the more we can have on the board, I think just the more possibilities we have.
Yeah.
So those are our 20 questions. Well, really more than 20 with our
and all your sex
sub
questions. Yeah.
Just 2. But man, this was so much fun. I thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for the invite. This is fun. I usually kind of just go off the cuff with these sort of things, but like you send me these questions and I had to sit down and really put some thought into some of them. And it was exciting. It kind of makes you realize kind of what your preferences are and stuff you might want to see, or maybe why you gravitate towards certain versions as opposed to others when you really break it down and see what kind of your preferred versions are. And look, and again, like we said off the top, I'm glad there's so many different versions. Right? Because you can't have conversations like this if they don't have variations of versions either, right? So I welcome new variations, and if there's one I don't like, guess what? You wait 5 years, there'll be another one that I might like, as often as they retell these origins, right?
Listen, this was so fun, and I was honored to have you here for the 250th episode, and I'll just take this opportunity, as always, whenever we do these milestone episodes, to thank every guest, audience member, and patron. I really appreciate everyone's support. I love doing this and having that engagement from the folks who join me for these episodes and who listen and who comment and send messages. All of that really, really, really means a lot. So thank you to everyone. And what would you like to share with folks about Always Hold On to Smallville?
Well, we just did the Ultimate Superman Origin. We're right now on Always Hold On to Smallville. We are doing Smallville, the Ultimate Season. Anthony, you're a guest of mine on a few of those episodes, and what we're doing is we're going through every single episode number of Smallville and determining the ultimate season of Smallville, picking the ultimate episode 1, the ultimate episode 2 across all 10 seasons, etc., etc. It's a lot of fun. It can be chaotic. There's some surprises because it's not my ultimate season. It's our ultimate season. So with the goal being, at the end of the day, you got 22 of the best episodes of Smallville, but it just so happened to be in that episode number. So that was the interesting wrinkle that I found. It's fun to see when there's like parallels between the episodes. Like apparently Christopher Reeve is the episode 17 slot because both his episodes are episode 17. Stuff like that to go across the years, and that's what we're doing right now because we have completed our series rewatch. So if you're interested in Smallville, we've name dropped it a few times. If you listen to Digging for Kryptonite, Anthony name drops it almost every podcast. And check us out over there. Start with your favorite episode. If you want to start that way, start at the beginning. We have all 218 episodes over there we've covered in meticulous detail. So check it out over there. And again, thanks, Anthony, for having me back onto this 250th episode. And here's to 250 more episodes.
Well, thank you very much. And I encourage everyone to check out your show. And the Ultimate Season has been a lot of fun to be a part of and to listen to. And yes, just a very fun and surprising exercise to put that together. So I hope everyone will check that out. Zach, thank you so much for your time. I'll cut you loose here, but audience, don't go anywhere. It's time for a special mailbag segment as I read and respond to the awesome questions and testimonials that you guys submitted for our milestone 250th episode. Jody asks a question that I do get fairly often. As a father and a professional, how do you find time to read and watch all your review? And what are your optimal reading conditions? I can't seem to find the time. So 2 things. Actually 3 things. Number 1, I stay up quite late, usually until like 2 a.m. if I'm being honest, which is later than I would recommend. But the fact is I'm up quite late. Also, my wife tends to go to sleep on the earlier side. Like our son is usually in bed and asleep by 8 o'clock, and she usually goes to sleep 9, maybe 10. So I have a good number of hours at night when the house is quiet to read and watch. The other thing is that I do pace myself, right? So it's not like I'm reading 50 issues for every episode. That would become burdensome, but I try to space things out. So sometimes, yes, I will have a big reading project. Other times it might just be an arc, sometimes even an issue, or it'll be watching a handful of episodes or a movie. So that variety, plus having those quiet nighttime hours, that's the answer. Rick Reason says, huge congrats. Did you ever think you'd run as long as you have? No, I can honestly say that I didn't. I mean, I think there was a point relatively early on when I was mapping things out, as I still do. And I probably was looking way ahead at that point to episode 175. And I kind of figured, all right, that might be a natural stopping point. And obviously we've gone well past that. So no, I couldn't have necessarily foreseen this, but I couldn't be happier that we're still going strong. He also says, did you think you would create this thing that has led to the connections you've created with fellow fans and other podcasters? No, I mean, this network we have created has really surpassed any ambitions that I could have had. I mean, I had been podcasting for a few years before digging for Kryptonite. I did a show called My Comic Shop History about my local store. And then I went around to other comic shops and met a lot of great people through that process as well. But it is something different. It's a whole other level when you're talking about a fandom, when you're talking about people with a shared love of a character like Superman. So to have forged true friendships with guests and audience members across the country and around the world truly has exceeded any expectations. And I don't want to sound like too precious about it, but really, really a blessing of this whole process. So something I really appreciate. And Rick says, why are you such a Chuck Austin hater? Hey, now that Action Comics run that we talked about last summer, that was a rough one. That was a rough one. Tashmon says, congrats on 250 episodes. I'm a real newcomer to Superman, but I have to say that discovering this show was instrumental in the character becoming one of my guys these past few years. My question for you, if you had to pick one collected edition from your shelf to represent what you love about Superman, which would it be? And then Tashmon cites the DC Finest Collection, The First Superhero. I mean, I feel like you guys can probably guess my answer. Well, the fundamental answer is it depends on who I'm talking to, what their interests are, and what their frame of reference is. Like I've always said that I think Superman for All Seasons, for its emphasis on the character and the emotion and not so much the plot or the comic book mythology, that would be my go-to if I were giving something to someone who's really not well versed in all of the lore. So that would definitely be up there. Obviously, I just cited Superman Birthright as my favorite telling of the origin. That's definitely another go-to. And then once more, this shouldn't shock anybody, but maybe the Death and Return of Superman Omnibus, which has that entire saga. I mean, it's an amazing event. It runs the gamut of emotion. It's action-packed. It's surprising. There's mystery. And obviously, it was very personally formative for me. But having gone back through that material, I really feel like event-wise, it holds up. So, like I said, it depends on the audience, but probably one of those three: For All Seasons, Birthright, or The Death and Return of Superman. Our pal 5 million says, I heard you once on an episode deny the title Superman expert, 250 episodes in and a vast well of knowledge amassed. Do you think your mindset has changed about that at all? I still would never describe myself as a Superman expert or Superman historian, but I mean, I do recognize I have spent now countless hours reading and watching and thinking and talking about this. So I certainly acknowledge and accept the level of expertise I've cultivated, but like I said, it's still not something that I would grab as far as a title, in part because like one of the things that I always say, you guys hear me talk about this all the time, like it is a journey and there are things that I'm continuing to learn. And I do also recognize like any single topic that we talk about, as much as I might know about it, in most instances, there's someone who knows even more about it because it's the thing they're most passionate about when it comes to Superman. So, you know, there's a high degree of relativity with all of this, but at the same time, I can't deny the fact that I have invested a significant amount of time with all of this material. 5 million continues. My second question is, where do you see the podcast 250 episodes later? On my drive home the other day, I was thinking about where my fandom has taken me in life and the people it's introduced me to and how it'll all manifest in years to come. I began to wonder what I'll do with all this knowledge at 60. Where do you picture your journey when you're that age? Also, shout out to all your guests. I love listening to each episode and wasn't bored a single time. Appreciate you and the guests. Well, that's very kind. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. As far as kind of where I see my fandom going, I hope that, and I expect that this fandom, my love of this character, will remain a part of my life. I mean, it has since I was a little kid. And I can honestly say these past 6 years doing this podcast, it's the most dialed in to Superman and my fandom that I have ever been. And do I necessarily expect to maintain that degree of intensity at age 60? Podcast aside, I have no idea, but I do hope that this remains a part of my life. I hope it's something that I can share with my son to the extent that he's interested in it. And I mean, one of the awesome things about this is like, there's always new stuff coming out. So it's not like we're talking about a finite well of material here. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have a great answer other than that. this has been a part of my life for so long, since I was 5. So I really hope that that continues moving forward. And then the last one on the question front is from Jeff Tischer, who says, I'm a fairly new listener, but I'm amazed and impressed that you are not only still going strong at 250 episodes, but clearly have a huge breadth and width of material you still want to explore. And you are genuinely excited about it. That is a feat in and of itself. You've covered amazing eras of Superman and his family, discussed with amazing fans and compatriots, and interviewed some of the best and brightest who have worked professionally on the Man of Steel. So what are some more areas you would like to explore? Do you have long-term plans for the next 250 episodes? So you guys know I plan ahead. I don't plan that far ahead. I don't have the next 250 mapped out, but I guess I can say I do have, generally speaking, the next 2 years mapped out. Now, within that, there's a lot that's going to shift and change as we move forward. But as far as the general topics and those big tentpole events, I do have those next couple of years sketched out. I've been saying the same thing since we hit our first milestone anniversary episode, and my position remains the same. Like, as long as I am curious and excited and the audience is engaged, I'm more than happy to continue doing this. And I guess one of the most pleasant surprises is that 250 episodes in, I'm still curious. And there are always these kind of new pockets to explore. There are topics that we've gone back to that we've covered previously. We've gone back to with a different perspective, or we've covered it in a different way. There's always new stuff that's coming out. So those projects are things to cover, but then sometimes they spark all these other ideas. I mean, the fact that we're getting a Supergirl movie this June spurred this whole run of episodes that we're doing for the months leading up to it. So, that's one of the other aspects of this, is just sort of being nimble and responding to what's going on and where I think the interest from the fandom is, and how best we can serve that and deliver content that aligns with people's interests. So, I love doing this. I don't have any plans to stop. I might take longer breaks, right? I think we might start to see longer summer breaks or a longer holiday break at the end of a year. But no, I absolutely love doing this. And as far as specific topics, I don't want to give away much, but I guess what I would say is that there are a number of DCU relationships and team affiliations where I feel like there's more work for us to do. Obviously, I've talked about having dedicated Legion coverage on the docket. It'll still be a little while before we get there because I still find it so daunting, but we will get there. I've also been really taken with the across time and media surveys that we've done, the villain spotlights that we've done. So that's one of the other fun things too, as we move along, is kind of tackling topics in a different way, or even doing something like this episode, building the perfect origin. So there are different kinds of episodes that I've had a lot of fun experimenting with as well. So like I said, I don't have episode 500 on the Excel spreadsheet yet, but I do have the next couple of years generally sketched out. And then last but not least, we have a handful of testimonials here. Kay says, congrats on the big 250. The show is always a joy to listen to. I got into comics a few years ago and I found your show pretty early on. Beyond loving what I was reading, your show just made me want to read and find out more. Really appreciate that. Patrick Mullins says, keep up the great work on the podcast. When I started rereading Superman with the goal of reading everything and as close to chronological order as possible, I came across your show and it's been a real pleasure to listen alongside my reading. Thank you. That's awesome as well. Our pal Tim Bruns says, in late summer 2021, I saw a Facebook post for a podcast called Digging for Kryptonite. The host was going to be covering John Byrne's Superman run, my golden era of Superman comics. And though I'd never been much for podcasts, I thought I'd tune in. After that, I never tuned out. Anthony's love of the Man of Steel, his in-depth discussions with creators and fellow fans, and his engagement with the audience has made each new drop appointment listening. Congratulations on 250 episodes. Here's to at least 250 more. Really appreciate that, Tim. And I've greatly enjoyed the discussions that we've gotten to have on and off mic. Similarly, Martin Gray, who was just here for our Bronze Age Supergirl talk, says, I'm very much a latecomer to the show, but I'm so glad I eventually found it. I've rarely felt so engaged with the podcast. It's not just the wonderful knowledge bombs dropped and the fascinating discussions, it's the warmth of digging for kryptonite. This show is so darn welcoming, and that's down to the respect Anthony gives everyone, from the newest listener to the most regular of guests. Congratulations on 250, and thanks. Really appreciate that, Martin. And it's so funny to hear him describe himself as a latecomer, because I feel like he's always been here. I mean, that's one of these things, and we've picked up so many folks along the way, and the fact that the audience has continued to grow despite how deep into this we are, is really a fantastic thing. And finally, Mike Thomas, one of our most dedicated audience members, says, congrats on the 250th episode. Your podcast has definitely reignited my fan journey. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I first discovered Superman on Super Friends, which was on basically my entire childhood, from preschool to high school, and I watched it all the way through. The Christopher Reeve movies made me a much bigger fan, and then I started watching the reruns of the George Reeve series and reading Bronze Age comics. Later, I watched Smallville. I watched the early years in real time, but have only gotten into the later seasons in recent years thanks to your and Zach's respective podcasts. Thank you for this podcast, which is always a fun part of my week. Thank you so much to Mike and to everyone who submitted comments and questions. Really means a lot to have the support from you guys. Always appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you come back next week as our Supergirl coverage resumes. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Rewards include our DCU spinoff podcast, advanced listens, sponsorship opportunities, and more. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please rate and review the podcast via your platform of choice, subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Lighting the Bat Signal, a Batman fan journey, which applies the signature Digging for Kryptonite approach to the Dark Knight, as well as another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman, now in its final year covering the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.